The moment Clara Hayes counted her last coins for baby formula, she had no idea the CEO standing behind her would change everything. But when Alexander Stone asked, "Why didn't you tell me?" her world shattered and rebuilt in the same breath. Stay with me until the end of this incredible journey and comment on your city so I can see how far this story travels across the world. The fluorescent lights of Murphy's corner store buzzed overhead like angry wasps, casting harsh shadows across Clara Hayes's gaunt face as she stood frozen at the checkout counter. Her trembling fingers moved through the small pile of coins scattered across the worn formica surface, pennies, nickels, dimes, each one representing a choice she'd been forced to make. Skip lunch or buy formula, pay the electric bill or keep her daughter fed. "Ma'am," the teenage cashier's voice cut through her desperate calculations, impatience bleeding through his practiced customer service smile. "The total is $14.57. Clara's heart hammered against her ribs as she counted again. $13.43. She was $1.14 short. Behind her, she could feel the weight of other customers' stares, their sighs of irritation as the line grew longer. The can of Similac Alimentum, the only formula that didn't make 18-month-old Lily violently sick, felt impossibly heavy in her other hand. I need to count again," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the store's ambient noise. The shame burned hotter than the fever that had been coursing through her daughter's tiny body for the past 2 days. "Look, lady, either you got the money or you don't." The cashier huffed his teenage arrogance on full display. "There's other people waiting." Clara's cheeks flamed red as she heard someone behind her mutter something about welfare queens and should have thought about that before having kids. The words hit her like physical blows, each one a reminder of how far she'd fallen from the woman she used to be. 2 years ago, she'd been Clara Hayes' rising star in the marketing department at Stone Industries, pulling in a 6-figure salary and planning a future that seemed limitless. Now she was just another struggling single mother, counting coins to feed her sick child. "I'm sorry," she began, her voice cracking. "Maybe I could put something back." "That won't be necessary." The voice that cut through her humiliation was deep, authoritative, and oddly familiar. Clara turned to see a man stepping forward from the line behind her, tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a charcoal gray suit that probably cost more than she'd made in the last 3 months. His dark hair was perfectly styled, his jawline sharp enough to cut glass, and his steel blue eyes held an intensity that made her breath catch in her throat. Without ceremony, he placed a crisp $20 bill on the counter next to her scattered coins. "This should cover it." The cashier's entire demeanor changed instantly. "Yes, sir, absolutely, sir." He practically stumbled over himself to ring up the transaction, suddenly all smiles and efficiency. Clara stared at the stranger, her mouth opening and closing like a fish gasping for air. You don't understand. I can't. I mean, I don't have a way to pay you back right now, but if you give me your information, don't worry about it." His eyes dropped to the formula in her hand, and something shifted in his expression, a flicker of something that might have been concern or recognition, or both. "Special formula." She nodded mutely, clutching the can tighter. "My daughter. She has a sensitive stomach. This is the only kind that doesn't make her sick, but it's so expensive, and with her fever..." She caught herself realizing she was rambling to a complete stranger about her personal problems. "I'm sorry. You didn't need to hear all that." "How old?" he asked quietly. 18 months. The words came out as barely a whisper. The man's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "And her father..." Clara's laugh was bitter hollow. Gone. Left when I was 7 months pregnant. Said he wasn't ready for the responsibility. She took the bag from the cashier's outstretched hand, the change from the 20 burning in her palm. Thank you for this. Really. I know you probably think I'm just another charity case, but I don't think that at all. Something in his tone made her look up, really look at him for the first time. There was something familiar about the set of his shoulders, the way he carried himself with quiet confidence. But before she could place it, her phone rang. The generic ringtone she'd had to downgrade from her iPhone months ago echoed embarrassingly through the store. Mama? The voice on the other end was her upstairs neighbor, Mrs. Chen, an elderly woman who watched Lily when Clara had to run errands. You need to come home, right now. The baby's fever is getting worse and she won't stop crying. The blood drained from Clara's face. How much worse? I think it's over 103. She's burning up, honey. I think we need to get her to a hospital. The phone slipped from Clara's numb fingers, clattering to the floor. The stranger, who had been listening to every word, bent down and retrieved it without hesitation. Mrs. Chen. He spoke into the phone with calm authority. This is a friend of Clara's. We're on our way now. If the baby's condition worsens at all, call 911 immediately. Don't wait for us. He ended the call and looked at Clara, who was standing paralyzed with terror. My car's right outside. Let's go. I can't just, she stammered. Your daughter needs medical attention. Right now. You can argue with me about it later. He was already moving toward the exit, clearly expecting her to follow. What's your address? Clara's maternal instincts overrode her caution. Maple Street, the old Victorian with the blue shutters. But I don't even know your name. Alexander, he said, simply holding the door open for her. Alexander Stone. The name hit her like a physical blow. Alexander Stone, CEO of Stone Industries. Her former boss, though she'd never actually met him personally. He was corporate royalty, the kind of man who lived in boardrooms and penthouse offices, not the kind who bought formula for desperate single mothers in corner stores. She began, but he was already guiding her toward a sleek, black Tesla Model S parked at the curb. Questions later, he said, opening the passenger door. Your daughter comes first. The drive to her apartment took less than 5 minutes, but it felt like a lifetime. Clara sat rigid in the passenger seat, hyper-aware of the luxury surrounding her leather seats that probably cost more than her monthly rent. A dashboard that looked like something from a spaceship, the subtle scent of expensive cologne mixing with new car smell. It was a stark reminder of the world she'd lost, the life that had been ripped away from her when everything fell apart. I know who you are, she said quietly, as they turned onto Maple Street. Alexander's hands tightened on the steering wheel. I figured you might. I used to work for you. Well, not directly. I was in marketing. Clara Hayes, though, I suppose you wouldn't remember. I remember. The simple statement hung in the air between them, loaded with implications Clara couldn't begin to process. Before she could respond, they were pulling up in front of her building, a once grand Victorian that had been converted into cheap apartments, its paint peeling and front steps sagging with age and neglect. Mrs. Chen met them at the front door, her weathered face creased with worry. Oh, Clara, thank goodness. She's getting worse. I gave her some infant Tylenol like you showed me, but it's not helping. Clara took the stairs, 2 at a time, Alexander close behind her. Her apartment was on the 2nd floor, a cramped 1-bedroom with thin walls and a heating system that worked when it felt like it. She'd tried to make it homey with second-hand furniture and photographs, but there was no disguising the fact that it was a far cry from the modern condo she'd once called home. Lily was in her crib, her tiny face flushed bright red with fever, her usually golden curls damp with sweat. She was crying weakly, a pitiful sound that sent daggers through Clara's heart. "Hey, baby girl," Clara whispered, scooping her daughter into her arms. "Mama's here." Lily felt like a little furnace against her chest. Clara grabbed the thermometer from the dresser with shaking hands, taking her daughter's temperature under her arm. When the device beeped, the digital display showed 104.2 degrees. "Hospital," Alexander said from behind her. "Now." Clara nodded, grabbing the diaper bag she kept packed for emergencies. "St. Mary's is closest, but I don't have insurance right now, and the emergency room fees—" "Don't worry about the money." Alexander was already moving toward the door. "Just bring whatever she needs." The drive to the hospital was a blur of fevered baby cries and Clara's whispered reassurances. Alexander drove with focused precision, navigating traffic like a man who was used to being in control of every situation. At one point, he reached over and placed his hand on Clara's shoulder as she rocked Lily in the passenger seat. "She's going to be fine," he said quietly. "Kids run high fevers. It looks scarier than it usually is." "You have children?" Clara asked, surprised by the confidence in his voice. Something flickered across his face. "No, but I have a lot of experience with worry." St. Mary's emergency department was controlled chaos, nurses hustling between rooms, monitors beeping the sharp smell of disinfectant, mixing with the underlying scent of human suffering. Alexander took charge the moment they walked through the automatic doors, approaching the triage nurse with the kind of authority that got immediate attention. "We need to see someone about this baby immediately," he said, his voice carrying the weight of unquestioned command. "High fever, 18 months old." The nurse, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes and iron-gray hair, took one look at Lily's flushed face and nodded. "Room 3. The doctor will be right with you." As they followed the nurse down the hallway, Clara couldn't help but notice how differently she was being treated with Alexander by her side. The last time she'd brought Lily to the emergency room when she'd had that terrible ear infection, Clara had waited for 3 hours in a plastic chair, filling out forms and worrying about bills. Now doors were opening, people were moving with urgency, and she was being treated like someone who mattered. Dr. Patricia Williams was a no-nonsense woman in her 50s, with gentle hands and a reassuring presence. She examined Lily thoroughly, asking Clara detailed questions about symptoms, feeding patterns, and recent changes in behavior. "Has she been eating?" Dr. Williams asked, using a tiny stethoscope to listen to Lily's heart. "Not much," Clara admitted. "She had a little formula this morning, but she's been refusing most food for 2 days. That's why I was at the store. We were almost out of the special formula, and it's the only kind she can keep down." Dr. Williams nodded thoughtfully. "She's definitely fighting something. Her throat is quite red, and her lymph nodes are swollen. I want to run some tests, but my initial assessment is that this is likely a viral infection. The good news is that at her age, these things usually resolve on their own with supportive care." "But the fever is so high," Clara said, her voice tight with anxiety. "We'll get that down with some stronger medication, and I want to start her on IV fluids to make sure she doesn't get dehydrated. She'll need to stay overnight for observation, but I'm optimistic that she'll turn the corner in the next 24 hours. The relief that washed over Clara was so intense it left her lightheaded. "Overnight, but I mean the costs." "I'll handle it," Alexander said quietly from his position by the window. Throughout the examination, he'd remained silent but watchful, like a sentinel guarding over them. Dr. Williams looked between Clara and Alexander with curiosity, but didn't comment. "I'll get the admission process started. We'll move her to a pediatric room where you'll be more comfortable." As the doctor left, Clara finally allowed herself to really look at Alexander. He'd loosened his tie and rolled up his sleeves, his perfectly styled hair now slightly mussed. But what struck her most was the expression on his face as he watched Lily. There was something tender there, something that spoke of unexpected vulnerability beneath his corporate armor. "You don't have to stay," Clara said softly. "You've already done more than enough. I'm not going anywhere." His voice was firm, brooking no argument. "Why?" The question that had been burning inside her finally escaped. "Why are you doing this? You don't know me, not really. I'm just some former employee who couldn't even afford baby formula." Alexander was quiet for a long moment, his gaze fixed on Lily's sleeping face. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. "Because 3 years ago, I should have asked you to dinner." Clara stared at him, certain she'd misheard. "What?" "The Morrison campaign. You were the lead on creative, and you came up with that brilliant tagline, 'Building Tomorrow Today.' I remember thinking you were the most innovative mind in the department. Hell, maybe in the whole company." He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture that somehow made him seem younger, more human. "I was in that presentation meeting when you pitched the concept. You were wearing a blue dress, and you had this way of making complex ideas seem effortless." The memory came flooding back, Clara standing at the head of the conference table, presenting to a room full of executives, feeling like she was exactly where she belonged. It had been one of her best days at Stone Industries, the moment when she truly believed her career was going to soar. "I wanted to ask you out after that meeting," Alexander continued. "But then I talked myself out of it. Worried about company policy, about people thinking you'd gotten ahead because of personal relationships instead of talent. I thought I was protecting your reputation." "You noticed me." Clara's voice was small, disbelieving. "Clara, everyone noticed you. You were brilliant. You lit up every room you walked into." His eyes met hers, and she saw something raw and honest there. "When I learned you'd left the company, I assumed you'd gotten a better offer somewhere else. It never occurred to me that I was pregnant and alone and too ashamed to ask for help," Clara finished for him. "Why didn't you tell me?" The question came out like a plea. "When everything fell apart, why didn't you reach out?" "We have programs, resources. I would have helped." Clara laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Tell you what exactly? That the rising star in marketing had gotten knocked up by a man who turned out to be married. That I'd been so naive, so trusting, that I'd never even thought to ask the right questions until it was too late." The bitter truth spilled out of her like poison from a wound. Jacob Barrett. That was his name. He told me he was a consultant, recently divorced, looking for something real. We dated for 8 months. He took me to nice restaurants, bought me flowers, talked about our future together. I thought I'd found my happily ever after. Alexander's expression darkened. "What happened?" "I found out I was pregnant, and suddenly he started getting nervous, making excuses, missing dates. I should have seen the signs, but I was so happy, so excited about the baby." Clara's voice cracked. "Then one day a woman showed up at my apartment. His wife. Apparently they'd never been divorced. Hell, they weren't even separated. She was pregnant too with their 3rd child." "Jesus," Alexander breathed. "She told me everything. How Jacob made a habit of this, finding successful women, romancing them, then disappearing when things got complicated. Apparently I wasn't even the first." Clara wiped away tears she hadn't realized were falling. "The worst part was how she looked at me. Like I was the other woman, the homewrecker. She didn't care that I'd been lied to, that I'd been just as much a victim as she was." "What did you do, Poisson?" "What could I do? I quit my job because I couldn't face the whispers, the speculation. I used my savings to move apartments to try to start over somewhere Jacob couldn't find me. But babies are expensive, and I'd never realized how much of my identity was tied up in my career." Clara looked down at Lily, who was sleeping peacefully despite the IV in her tiny arm. By the time she was born, I'd burned through most of my money. Pride kept me from asking for help. I kept thinking I could handle it on my own. But you couldn't. No, Clara admitted. I couldn't. Every month got harder. I sold my car, moved to a cheaper apartment, took whatever work I could find. But without reliable childcare, without references from my last job, it became impossible to get back on my feet. Alexander was quiet for a long time, processing everything she'd told him. When he finally spoke, his voice was carefully controlled. This Jacob Barrett. Do you know where he is now? Something in his tone made Clara look up sharply. Why, it's, just curious. Alexander, whatever you're thinking, don't. I've moved past it. I have to focus on Lily now, not on revenge fantasies. It's not about revenge, he said quietly. It's about justice, and maybe preventing him from doing this to someone else. Before Clara could respond, Dr. Williams returned with a nurse in tow. Good news, she announced. Lily's fever is already starting to come down, and her blood work looks much better than I expected. We're going to move her to a room upstairs, and if she continues to improve overnight, you might be able to take her home tomorrow afternoon. The pediatric ward at St. Mary's was painted in cheerful pastels with cartoon animals decorating the walls and child-sized furniture scattered throughout the common areas. Lily's room was small but comfortable with a reclining chair that could convert into a bed for Clara to sleep in. As they settled in for the night, Alexander excused himself to make some phone calls. Clara watched him through the room's glass window as he paced the hallway, his phone pressed to his ear, his expression serious. She wondered what urgent business matters required his attention at nearly 9 o'clock on a weeknight, but she was too exhausted to really care. Lily's fever continued to drop throughout the evening, and she even managed to drink a few ounces of formula before falling into a more peaceful sleep. Clara dozed fitfully in the reclining chair, waking every hour or so to check on her daughter, to make sure she was still breathing, still fighting off whatever had made her so sick. Around midnight, she woke to find Alexander sitting in the room's second chair, still in his suit, but with his tie completely removed and his shirt unbuttoned at the collar. He was reading something on his phone, his brow furrowed in concentration. You're still here, Clara whispered, not wanting to wake Lily. I told you, I wasn't going anywhere. He set his phone aside and looked at her with tired eyes. How are you holding up? Better. She feels cooler. Clara reached over to smooth a hand across Lily's forehead. Dr. Williams thinks we'll be able to go home tomorrow. That's good news. They sat in comfortable silence for a while. The only sounds, the quiet beeping of Lily's monitors and the distant murmur of the hospital's nighttime activity. Finally, Clara worked up the courage to ask the question that had been nagging at her all evening. Alexander, how did you know about the formula? I mean, you seemed to understand immediately why I was buying it, what it meant. He was quiet for so long that Clara thought he might not answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was distant, almost dreamy. I had a brother, Sean. He was 5 years younger than me, born when I was in middle school. He had severe allergies, digestive issues. My mother spent years trying to find foods he could tolerate, formulas that wouldn't make him sick. Alexander's hands clenched in his lap. I remember her counting change at the grocery store just like you were doing tonight. My father he wasn't around much. Building the company, he said. So it was just her trying to keep Sean healthy on whatever money she could scrape together. What happened to him? He died when he was 3. An allergic reaction to something in a formula we thought was safe. By the time we got him to the hospital, Alexander's voice trailed off. My mother blamed herself. My father blamed her too, said she should have been more careful. The marriage didn't survive it. Clara felt tears pricking at her eyes. I'm so sorry. It was a long time ago, but when I saw you at that counter tonight, counting coins for special formula, it all came flooding back. The desperation, the fear, the way poverty can make every choice feel like life or death. He looked at Lily sleeping peacefully in her hospital bed. I couldn't walk away. I couldn't let history repeat itself, not when I had the power to help. Is that why you built the company the way you did, why Stone Industries has such generous family benefits? Alexander nodded. After my father died and I took over, I made sure no employee would ever have to choose between feeding their family and paying their bills. Full healthcare coverage, on-site childcare, family emergency funds. I've seen what financial stress can do to families. I won't let it happen on my watch. But somehow I fell through the cracks anyway. Because you didn't ask for help. Because pride and shame kept you from reaching out. Alexander leaned forward in his chair. Clara, what happened to you, what that bastard Jacob did, none of that was your fault. You were a victim of someone else's lies and cruelty. There's no shame in needing help. Clara was crying now, quiet tears that felt like they were washing away months of built-up guilt and self-recrimination. I felt so stupid, so naive. How could I not have known he was married? How could I have been so blind? Because you trusted someone who seemed trustworthy. Because you believed in love and honesty and all the things that decent people believe in. Alexander's voice was fierce with conviction. He's the one who should be ashamed, not you. Sometimes I wonder if Lily would be better off with a different mother. Someone stronger, someone who could provide for her properly. Don't. The word came out sharp, almost angry. Don't you dare doubt yourself like that. Do you know what I see when I look at you? I see a woman who sold everything she owned to keep her daughter fed and safe. I see someone who swallowed her pride to buy formula with pocket change because her child's health mattered more than her dignity. I see the strongest person I've ever met. Clara stared at him through her tears, overwhelmed by the intensity of his words, by the conviction in his voice. You want to know the truth, Alexander continued. I've been running a Fortune 500 company for 8 years. I've negotiated billion-dollar deals, managed thousands of employees, made decisions that affect entire industries. But I have never been as impressed by anyone as I was by you tonight, standing at that counter, doing whatever it took to take care of your daughter. I don't feel strong, Clara whispered. Strength isn't about feeling invincible. It's about doing what needs to be done even when you're scared, even when you're tired, even when the whole world seems to be against you. Alexander stood up and moved to the window, looking out at the city lights beyond. You know what my biggest regret is? What? That night, 3 years ago, after the Morrison presentation. I should have followed my instincts. I should have asked you to dinner company policy be damned. Maybe if I had, things would have been different. Maybe you would have felt comfortable coming to me when everything fell apart. Clara felt her heart skip a beat. Alexander, I'm not saying this to complicate things or to take advantage of a vulnerable situation, he said quickly, turning back to face her. I'm saying it because I think you deserve to know that you were seen, that you mattered, even when you felt invisible. Before Clara could respond, her phone buzzed with a text message. She glanced at the screen and felt her blood turn to ice. The message was from an unknown number, but she recognized the writing style immediately. Heard through the grapevine that you're in town. We should catch up. Jay, Clara's hands started shaking so violently that she nearly dropped the phone. Alexander noticed immediately and was at her side in an instant. What is it? What's wrong? Clara held out the phone with trembling fingers. Alexander read the message and his expression darkened to something Clara had never seen before: cold, calculating fury. "How did he get your number?" "I don't know. I changed it after I moved, but phone numbers aren't that hard to find, if you know what you're doing." Alexander was already pulling out his own phone. "This ends now." "What are you doing?" "Making some calls. Jacob Barrett is about to learn that there are consequences for the choices he's made." "Alexander, please, don't make this worse. I just want him to leave us alone." "He will. I promise you that." Alexander's voice was steel wrapped in silk. "But first, there's something you need to know. Something I found out while I was making those phone calls earlier." Clara felt her stomach drop. "What?" "Jacob Barrett isn't just a random predator who targets successful women. He's done this before multiple times. And right now today, he's in the process of applying for a senior position at Morrison Holdings, our biggest competitor." "What?" "It gets worse. The resume he submitted lists Stone Industries as his most recent employer. He's claiming he worked in our strategic development department for 2 years, that he left voluntarily for a better opportunity." Alexander's jaw was tight with controlled anger. "He's using our company's reputation to legitimize himself, probably planning to sell whatever inside information he thinks he can get to Morrison's board." Clara felt sick. He's still doing it, still lying, still manipulating. And he's about to get a very rude awakening. Alexander's phone buzzed with an incoming call. "This is my private investigator. Give me 1 minute." He stepped out into the hallway to take the call, leaving Clara alone with her sleeping daughter and her racing thoughts. Everything was happening so fast 12 hours ago. She'd been counting pennies for formula, and now she was sitting in a hospital room, while the CEO of a Fortune 500 company planned to take down her ex-lover. It felt surreal, like something out of a movie rather than her actual life. When Alexander returned, his expression was grim but satisfied. "We've got him." "What do you mean, sir?" "Morrison Holdings just received a very detailed dossier about their potential new hire. Tax evasion, marriage fraud, identity theft, employment fraud. By morning, Jacob Barrett will be unemployable in this city." Clara should have felt vindicated, triumphant. Instead, she just felt tired. "What happens now?" "Now you focus on your daughter and your future. The rest, that's not your problem anymore." Alexander sat back down in the chair beside her bed, and for the first time since they'd met, Clara really studied his face. He was younger than she'd expected, probably only in his mid-30s, with the kind of sharp intelligence in his eyes that spoke of long hours and difficult decisions. But there was something else there too, something softer, that he probably didn't let many people see. "Can I ask you something?" Clara said quietly. "Anything." "Why me? I mean, really. Not the story about your brother, not the coincidence of the formula. Why did you really get involved?" Alexander was quiet for a long moment, and Clara thought he might deflect the question. But when he finally spoke, his honesty was breathtaking. "Because I've spent the last 8 years building a company, accumulating wealth and power and influence. I have everything a man is supposed to want. But tonight, watching you fight for your daughter with nothing but pocket change and determination, that's the first time in years that I've seen what real strength looks like." He leaned forward, his eyes locked on hers. "I've been so focused on climbing ladders and winning battles that I forgot what I was fighting for. You reminded me that success isn't about what you accumulate, it's about what you're willing to sacrifice for the people you love." Clara felt something shift inside her chest, a flutter of possibility that she'd thought was dead forever. "Alexander, I know this is complicated. I know you've been hurt, and the last thing you need is another man making promises he might not keep. His voice was quiet but steady. But I need you to know that this isn't charity. This isn't pity. This is me finally 3 years too late asking if you'd like to have dinner with me sometime. Before Clara could answer, Lily stirred in her bed, making the soft murmuring sounds that meant she was waking up. Clara immediately went to her daughter, smoothing her hair and checking her temperature with the back of her hand. "Hey, baby girl," she whispered. "How are you feeling?" Lily's eyes fluttered open, and for the first time in days, they were clear and bright instead of glassy with fever. She looked around the unfamiliar room with curiosity rather than distress, and when she saw Alexander sitting in the corner, she didn't cry or hide her face as she usually did with strangers. "Mama," she said in her sweet baby voice, reaching up to touch Clara's face. "I'm here, sweetheart. I'm here." Dr. Williams arrived for morning rounds just after 7, and her smile when she saw Lily sitting up and babbling was worth more than any words. "Well, hello there, little one. You're looking much better this morning." "Her fever broke around 4, Clara reported. "She's been more alert and she actually drank a full bottle about an hour ago." "Excellent. Let me just check a few things." Dr. Williams went through her examination with practiced efficiency, testing Lily's reflexes, listening to her heart and lungs, checking her throat and ears. "This is exactly what we hoped to see. I think you can take her home this afternoon." The relief that washed over Clara was so intense it left her dizzy. Really? Just keep giving her plenty of fluids, watch her temperature and bring her back if anything changes. But I think the worst is behind you, Cholman. As Dr. Williams left to process the discharge paperwork, Clara turned to find Alexander watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now you go home and take care of your daughter," he said simply. "But Clara, my offer stands. When you're ready, when you feel like your world has settled back into place, I'd like to take you to dinner. No pressure, no expectations. Just 2 people getting to know each other properly." Clara looked down at Lily, who was playing with the hospital bracelet on her tiny wrist, completely oblivious to the adult conversation happening around her. This little girl was her world, her priority, her everything. But maybe, just maybe, there was room in that world for something else. Something like hope. "Okay," she said quietly. Okay, I'd like that. When things settle down, when I figure out what comes next, I'd like to have dinner with you." Alexander's smile was like sunrise after the longest night of her life. "I'll wait as long as it takes." As they prepared to leave the hospital, Clara caught sight of herself in the bathroom mirror. She looked tired, worn down by months of struggle and a night of worry. But there was something else there too, a spark that she'd thought was extinguished forever. For the first time in longer than she could remember, she was looking forward to tomorrow. The drive back to her apartment was quiet, with Lily sleeping peacefully in her car seat, and Alexander handling the Tesla with the same controlled precision he seemed to bring to everything. When they pulled up in front of her building, Clara felt a familiar wave of embarrassment wash over her. "This is it," she said unnecessarily. "It's perfect," Alexander replied, and somehow he made it sound like he meant it. As Clara gathered Lily and her things, Alexander reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a business card. But when he handed it to her, she saw that he'd written something on the back in his own handwriting. "My personal number," he explained. "Not for emergencies, not for business, just if you want to talk. About anything." Clara tucked the card into her purse like it was made of precious metal. "Thank you for everything. I don't know how I'll ever—" "You don't owe me anything," Alexander said firmly. But Clara, promise me something. What? Promise me you'll never count pennies for formula again. If you need anything at all, you'll call me. Clara felt tears threatening again. I promise. Good. Alexander stepped out of the car and came around to help her with Lily's car seat. As they stood on the sidewalk together, Clara was struck by how surreal the moment felt. 24 hours ago, she'd been alone and desperate. Now she was standing next to one of the most powerful men in the city, holding his business card and trying to process the fact that he wanted to take her to dinner. Alexander, she said, as he was getting back into his car. Yeah, 3 years ago, after the Morrison presentation, if you had asked me to dinner, I would have said yes. His smile was brilliant. Good to know. As Clara watched him drive away, she felt Lily stirring in her arms. Her daughter looked up at her with bright, clear eyes, and for the first time in months, Clara felt like everything was going to be okay. She didn't know what the future held, didn't know if Alexander's interest would survive the reality of dating a single mother with no money and a complicated past. But for the first time since Jacob had walked out of her life, she was willing to find out. As she climbed the stairs to her apartment, Clara's phone buzzed with another text message. For a moment, her blood ran cold, thinking it might be Jacob again. But when she looked at the screen, she saw Alexander's name. Thank you for letting me help. Thank you for trusting me with your story. And thank you for saying yes to dinner. I haven't looked forward to anything this much in years. Clara smiled as she typed back, thank you for seeing me when I felt invisible. Thank you for believing I was worth helping. And thank you for waiting 3 years to ask. The response came immediately. I'd wait 3 more if I had to. As Clara unlocked her apartment door and stepped inside with her healthy daughter in her arms and hope blooming in her chest, she realized that sometimes the most extraordinary stories begin in the most ordinary places. Sometimes the moment that changes everything looks like nothing more than counting coins at a convenience store counter. Sometimes the end of one story is really just the beginning of another. 3 days passed in a strange kind of suspended animation. Clara found herself checking her phone obsessively, not for messages from Jacob, though the silence from that front was both a relief and a source of lingering anxiety, but for any word from Alexander. She told herself she was being ridiculous, that he was probably back to his regular life of board meetings and corporate decisions, that their night at the hospital had been an anomaly born of crisis and adrenaline. But then on Thursday afternoon, while Lily napped and Clara was folding the same load of laundry for the 3rd time just to keep her hands busy, her phone rang. Alexander's name appeared on the screen, and Clara's heart did something embarrassing in her chest. Hello? Clara, it's Alexander. How's Lily doing? Much better, thank you. Her appetite is back to normal and she's been sleeping through the night again. Clara tucked the phone between her ear and shoulder, continuing to fold tiny t-shirts and onesies. The doctor said she can resume her normal activities. That's wonderful news. And how are you doing? The question was simple, but something in his tone suggested he really wanted to know. I'm good. Still processing everything, I think. Some days it feels like that night at the hospital was a dream. It wasn't a dream. Alexander's voice was warm, reassuring. Clara, I was wondering, are you free this evening? I know it's short notice, but I'd like to keep my promise about dinner, if you're ready. Clara's hands stilled on the laundry. Tonight. Only if you want to. I know you have Lily to think about, and I don't want to push. I'd like that. Clara interrupted, surprising herself with how quickly the words came out. I mean, yes. I'd like to have dinner with you. She could hear the smile in his voice. Good. I'll pick you up at 7. And Clara, wear something comfortable. This isn't going to be some stuffy 5-star restaurant where you need to worry about which fork to use. After they hung up, Clara stared at her reflection in the bathroom mirror and wondered what the hell she was doing. She hadn't been on a real date in over 2 years, and that last one had been with Jacob, which hardly counted as a positive experience. What did she wear? What did they talk about? How did dating even work when you were a single mother with no money and a history of spectacularly poor judgment in men? Mrs. Chen knocked on her door at 6:30, carrying a plate of homemade dumplings and wearing the kind of knowing smile that suggested she'd been watching Clara pace around her apartment all afternoon. "You look nervous, honey," the older woman said, settling herself in Clara's living room chair with practiced ease. "This is the man from the hospital, yes, the one who helped with little Lily. Yes, but Mrs. Chen, I don't know if this is a good idea. What if what? What if you have a nice evening with a man who clearly cares about you and your daughter?" Mrs. Chen fixed Clara with a stern look. "Child, you've been carrying the weight of the world on your shoulders for too long. Maybe it's time to let someone else help." "But what if he realizes I'm not worth the trouble? What if this is just some rich man's guilty conscience, and once he gets to know the real me, then he's a fool and you're better off without him?" Mrs. Chen's voice was firm but kind. "But something tells me that's not going to happen." At exactly 7 o'clock, Clara heard a soft knock on her door. She'd chosen a simple blue dress, the same one she'd worn to the Morrison presentation 3 years ago, though she wasn't sure if Alexander would remember, and had managed to tame her hair into something resembling a professional style. When she opened the door, she found Alexander standing in the hallway, holding a small bouquet of daisies and looking almost as nervous as she felt. "Hi," he said simply. "Hi." They stood there for a moment, just looking at each other, and Clara was struck by how different he seemed outside of his corporate environment. He was wearing dark jeans and a navy sweater instead of his usual suit, and his hair was slightly less perfectly styled. He looked younger, more approachable, though no less devastatingly handsome. "These are for you," he said, holding out the flowers. "I know they're simple, but I remembered you had daisies on your desk at the office." Clara felt her breath catch. He'd remembered something that small, that personal from 3 years ago. "They're perfect. Thank you." As Clara introduced Alexander to Mrs. Chen and said goodbye to Lily, she noticed how naturally he interacted with both of them. He thanked Mrs. Chen graciously for watching Lily complimented her on the dumplings she'd brought, and even managed to coax a giggle out of Lily by making silly faces. There was nothing forced or performative about it, and he simply seemed to understand that these people mattered to Clara, which meant they mattered to him. "Where are we going?" Clara asked as they settled into his Tesla. "You'll see," Alexander said, with a mysterious smile. "I hope you trust me." The drive took them out of Clara's familiar neighborhood and into the hills overlooking the city. As they climbed higher, the houses became larger and more spread out, until finally Alexander turned into a long driveway that wound through carefully landscaped gardens toward a sprawling modern home with floor-to-ceiling windows that glowed warmly in the evening light. "This is your house," Clara said, and it wasn't a question. "This is my house," Alexander confirmed. "I know it's probably not what you were expecting for a first date, but I thought maybe you'd appreciate somewhere private. Somewhere we could talk without worrying about photographers or business associates or any of the other complications that come with my public life." Clara stared up at the house. It was beautiful, all clean lines and natural materials that seemed to blend seamlessly with the surrounding landscape. "You cooked." "I cooked," Alexander said. and there was something almost shy in his voice. Well, I tried to cook. There's a very real possibility we'll end up ordering pizza. The interior of Alexander's home was as impressive as the exterior, but what struck Clara most was how lived-in it felt. This wasn't some sterile showplace designed to impress visitors. There were books scattered on coffee tables, a half-finished crossword puzzle on the kitchen counter, family photographs on the mantelpiece. It felt like a home, not just a house. "This is beautiful," Clara said, running her fingers along the smooth granite of the kitchen island. "Thank you. I designed most of it myself, actually. It was a project that kept me sane during some particularly difficult years." Alexander opened the oven and pulled out what appeared to be a perfectly roasted chicken surrounded by vegetables. "I have to admit I may have gotten a little help from my housekeeper with the timing." They ate on the terrace overlooking the city, the lights twinkling below them like scattered stars. The food was delicious, simple, but perfectly prepared, and the wine Alexander had chosen was smooth and warming. But what Clara enjoyed most was the conversation. They talked about everything and nothing. Books they'd read, places they'd traveled, dreams they'd harbored as children. Alexander told her about his struggles to modernize his father's old-fashioned company, about the loneliness that sometimes came with leadership, about his complicated relationship with wealth and power. "People assume that having money solves all your problems," he said, swirling the wine in his glass. "And don't get me wrong, financial security is incredibly important, and I never take it for granted. But it also creates its own set of challenges. You never know if people like you for who you are or what you can do for them." "Is that why you've never married?" Clara asked. Then immediately regretted the personal question. "I'm sorry, that's none of my business." "No, it's okay. I want you to know these things about me." Alexander leaned back in his chair, his expression thoughtful. "I was engaged once about 5 years ago. Rebecca Thornfield, her family owns Thornfield Industries. It was, well, our families thought it was a perfect match. 2 business dynasties joining forces. What happened? I realized that she was in love with the idea of being Mrs. Alexander Stone, CEO's wife, more than she was in love with me. When I suggested we sign a prenup that would protect both our interests, she was furious. Not because she was offended by the lack of trust, but because she'd already mentally spent the money she would get in a divorce." Alexander's laugh was rueful. "It was a wake-up call. I started to wonder if anyone would ever see me as just Alexander, not Alexander Stone, billionaire." Clara was quiet for a moment, processing this glimpse into a world she'd never really understood. That must be incredibly lonely. It was, until now. The simple statement hung in the air between them, loaded with implication. Clara felt her cheeks warm under his steady gaze. "Alexander, I need you to know that I'm not looking for someone to rescue me. I mean, I appreciate everything you've done more than I can ever express, but I don't want you to think that I'm here because I need your money or your influence." "I know that," Alexander said quietly. "Clara, you had every opportunity to ask me for help over the past 3 days, and you didn't. You haven't asked me for anything except the chance to pay me back for the formula, which I refused to accept. If you were a gold digger, you'd be a pretty terrible one." Clara laughed, despite herself. "Thanks, I think. What I mean is, I know you're here because you want to be here. Because you're curious about me the same way I'm curious about you. Because there's something between us that has nothing to do with money or power or any of the external stuff." "What do you think it is, this something between us?" Alexander considered the question seriously. "Attraction, obviously, but more than that. Recognition, maybe, like we see something in each other that other people miss. What do you see in me?" Clara asked, genuinely curious. Strength that doesn't need to announce itself. Intelligence that adapts and improvises. Loyalty that runs so deep you'd sacrifice everything for the people you love. Alexander's voice was soft but certain. You're remarkable, Clara. I think you've been remarkable your whole life, but circumstances conspired to make you forget it. Clara felt tears threatening again, happy tears this time. Tears of recognition and gratitude. What do you see when you look at me? Someone who's been pretending to be harder than he really is for so long that he almost forgot what softness felt like. Clara's answer came without hesitation. Someone who built walls so high to protect himself that he forgot how much he wanted to let someone in. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, the weight of their honesty settling between them, like a bridge they were both tentatively crossing. Finally, Alexander stood and began clearing their plates. "Let me help," Clara said, but he waved her away. "You're my guest. Besides, it gives me something to do with my hands, while I work up the courage to ask you something." "What?" Alexander was quiet for a moment, loading dishes into what Clara was sure was a top-of-the-line dishwasher. When he finally spoke, his voice was carefully casual. "How would you feel about coming back to Stone Industries?" Clara's heart skipped. "What? Not to your old position. I mean, you could have it back if you wanted it, but I was thinking of something bigger. We're launching a new initiative, a corporate social responsibility program focused on supporting working families. Employee assistance childcare subsidies, emergency financial support, community outreach. It would be a director-level position, reporting directly to me." Clara stared at him. "Alexander, I can't. I mean, I appreciate the offer, but I won't be your charity case." "You wouldn't be." Alexander turned to face her, his expression serious. "Clara, I've spent the last 3 days reviewing your work from when you were with us before. Your Morrison campaign didn't just win us the client, it changed how we think about brand messaging across the entire company. Your innovation scores were off the charts, and your team consistently rated you as one of the best managers they'd ever worked with. But that was before. Before I had Lily, before I lost my confidence, before life knocked you down," Alexander finished. "But you got back up. You survived things that would have destroyed other people, and you did it while protecting your daughter and maintaining your integrity. Those aren't weaknesses, Clara. They're exactly the qualities we need for this position." Clara's mind was reeling. "I don't even have reliable childcare. Lily gets sick or Mrs. Chen isn't available, and the position comes with access to our on-site childcare facility. It's right in the building, staffed by licensed professionals, available whenever you need it." Alexander moved closer, his voice gentle but persuasive. "Clara, this isn't about charity or pity or anything else except the fact that you're brilliant, and I want you on my team. Our team. What would people think about us, I mean, if we're whatever this is, and I'm working for you? Let them think what they want. We know the truth that I wanted to hire you 3 years ago, and that any personal relationship between us is completely separate from your professional qualifications." Alexander reached out and took her hands in his. "But I understand if you need time to think about it. This is a lot to process." Clara looked down at their joined hands, marveling at how right it felt. "Can I ask you something? Anything? If we weren't here together tonight, if there was nothing personal between us, would you still offer me this job?" Alexander didn't hesitate. "Yes, absolutely yes." "Then I'll think about it," Clara said quietly. "I need to consider what's best for Lily, what's best for my future. But thank you for believing in me when I'd stopped believing in myself." Thank you for giving me something to believe in again. As the evening wound down, Alexander drove Clara home through the quiet city streets. The conversation had shifted to lighter topics, favorite movies, childhood memories, embarrassing moments from their respective pasts. Clara found herself relaxing in a way she hadn't in months, laughing at Alexander's story about the time he'd accidentally sent a love letter, meant for his high school girlfriend, to his economics teacher. "I was mortified," he was saying, as they pulled up in front of Clara's building. "Mr. Henderson kept the letter and would quote it back to me whenever I wasn't paying attention in class. Mr. Stone, perhaps you could apply the same passionate analysis to supply and demand curves that you applied to Miss Patterson's eyes." Clara was still laughing as they climbed the stairs to her apartment. "That's terrible, but also kind of sweet that he kept it. I think he enjoyed torturing me." Alexander paused outside her door. "Clara, I had an amazing time tonight." "So did I." Clara fumbled with her keys, suddenly nervous again. Do you want to come in for coffee? I mean, just coffee." Lily's sleeping and Mrs. Chen probably dozed off watching her stories, but "I'd love to," Alexander said simply. Mrs. Chen had indeed fallen asleep in Clara's living room chair, her knitting in her lap, and the television murmuring quietly in the background. Clara gently woke her and walked her to the door, thanking her profusely for watching Lily. "How was your evening, dear?" Mrs. Chen asked with a knowing smile. "Good," Clara said, aware that Alexander could hear every word from the kitchen, where he was pretending to examine her collection of mismatched mugs. "Really good." "I'm glad. You deserve some happiness." After Mrs. Chen left, Clara checked on Lily, who was sleeping peacefully in her crib, her tiny fist curled around her favorite stuffed rabbit. When she returned to the kitchen, she found Alexander standing by the window looking out at the street below. "Penny for your thoughts," Clara said, moving to stand beside him. "I was thinking about how different your life is from mine," Alexander said quietly. "Not better or worse, just different. More real, somehow." "What do you mean?" "Your neighbor watches your daughter out of genuine care, not because you're paying her. You know the cashier at the corner store by name. When Lily was sick, you didn't have a team of private doctors on speed dial. You went to the public hospital and waited like everyone else." Alexander turned to look at her. "There's something honest about the way you live that I'd forgotten existed." "Alexander, you don't have to romanticize poverty. There's nothing noble about not being able to afford proper health care or reliable child care." "That's not what I mean," Alexander said quickly. "I'm not saying being poor is good or that struggling financially builds character. I'm saying that you've managed to maintain your humanity despite everything you've been through. You still trust people, still see the good in them. That's not something money can buy." Clara was quiet for a moment, processing his words. "Sometimes I think I trust people too much. Look how that worked out with Jacob." "Jacob was a predator who targeted your trust and kindness. That doesn't mean you should stop trusting people altogether." "How do I know the difference? How do I know when someone is worth trusting?" Alexander moved closer to her, close enough that she could smell his cologne, could see the flecks of gold in his blue eyes. "I don't know if there's a foolproof way, but I think you start by trusting yourself, by believing that you're worth being honest with." "And are you being honest with me?" "I'm trying to be. It's harder than I expected." "What's hard about it?" Alexander was quiet for a long moment, and when he spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. "Being honest means admitting that I've been thinking about you every day for 3 years. That seeing you in that store wasn't just coincidence. I've been hoping I'd run into you somewhere somehow. that I've dated other women and compared them all to the memory of you presenting that Morrison campaign. Clara's breath caught. Alexander. Being honest means admitting that I'm terrified you'll realize I'm not as good a man as you think I am. That I'll disappoint you the way Jacob did, just in different ways. And what ways would those be? I work too much. I'm not good at sharing my feelings. I have trust issues that run so deep I sometimes sabotage relationships before they can really begin. Alexander's smile was rueful. I'm not an easy man to love, Clara. Who said anything about love? Clara asked, but her voice was gentle teasing. Fair point. Who said anything about love? Alexander echoed, but his eyes were serious, searching hers for something she wasn't sure she was ready to give. They stood there for a moment, the air between them charged with possibility and uncertainty. Finally, Clara reached up and touched his face, her fingers tracing the line of his jaw. I should probably tell you that I'm terrified too, she whispered. Of what? Of this. Of you. Of the way you make me feel like maybe I could be happy again. Clara's voice trembled slightly. Of the way you look at Lily like she matters to you, when most men run the other way when they find out I have a child. Lily is part of you. Of course she matters to me. It's not that simple, Alexander. Dating a single mother is complicated. There are good days and bad days, school plays and sick days and tantrums in grocery stores. There are nights when I'll be too tired to have adult conversations, mornings when I'll have baby food in my hair and no time for makeup. Do you think any of that scares me? Clara studied his face, looking for any sign of doubt or hesitation. I think you think it doesn't scare you, but you've never lived it. You're right, Alexander admitted. I haven't. But Clara, I've spent the last 8 years living a life that looked perfect from the outside and felt empty from the inside. If I have to choose between empty perfection and complicated happiness, that's not really a choice at all. Before Clara could respond, a soft cry came from Lily's room. Not distressed, just the sleepy babbling of a toddler waking up from a dream. Clara automatically moved toward the sound, but Alexander caught her hand. Can I meet her properly? I mean, when she's awake and feeling well. Clara's heart did something complicated in her chest. Are you sure? I'm sure. Lily was sitting up in her crib when they entered her room, her hair tousled from sleep, and her favorite rabbit clutched in her arms. When she saw Clara, she smiled and reached up to be held, but when she noticed Alexander standing behind her mother, she grew shy, burying her face against Clara's shoulder. It's okay, baby girl, Clara murmured, rubbing Lily's back. This is Alexander. He's the nice man who helped us when you were sick. Lily peeked at Alexander with curious eyes, then hid her face again. She's not usually this shy, Clara said apologetically, but Alexander just smiled. She's being smart, checking me out before she decides if I'm trustworthy. He crouched down so he was at Lily's eye level. Hi, Lily. I like your rabbit. What's his name? Lily whispered something that sounded like Bunny, but didn't emerge from her hiding place against Clara's shoulder. Bunny's a good name, Alexander said seriously. I had a stuffed animal when I was little too. His name was Captain Bear, and he went everywhere with me. This got Lily's attention. She turned her head slightly to look at Alexander with one eye. Did Captain Bear sleep in your bed? She asked in her sweet baby voice. Every single night. He was very good at scaring away monsters. Bunny scares monsters too, Lily said, holding up her rabbit for Alexander to see. He looks very brave, Alexander said solemnly. I bet monsters are terrified of him. Lily giggled a sound that made Clara's heart swell with something she couldn't quite name. Watching Alexander interact with her daughter, taking her seriously, speaking to her like a person, rather than talking over her head, felt almost surreal. Jacob had barely acknowledged Lily's existence even when she was born. He'd held her exactly once for a photograph Clara later burned, and had seemed relieved when the visit was over. "Mama, can Alexander see my books?" Lily asked, suddenly bold. "If he wants to," Clara said, looking at Alexander questioningly. "I'd love to see your books," Alexander said to Lily. "I like books very much." What followed was perhaps the most unlikely bedtime story session in history. Lily perched on Clara's lap, with Alexander sitting cross-legged on the floor beside them, insisted on reading every single book in her small collection. Alexander listened with rapt attention as Lily read, which mostly involved her reciting half-remembered passages and making up the rest, and asked thoughtful questions about the characters and pictures. "This one's my favorite," Lily announced, holding up a worn copy of Goodnight Moon. "Mama reads it every night." "It's a very good book," Alexander agreed. "Should we read it together?" As Clara read the familiar words, and Lily pointed out every detail in the illustrations, Alexander watched them with an expression of such tender contentment that Clara felt her carefully constructed walls beginning to crumble. This man, this powerful, successful, intimidating man, was sitting on her daughter's bedroom floor at 10 o'clock at night, acting like there was nowhere else he'd rather be. When the story was finished, and Lily was settled back in her crib with Bunny tucked securely under her arm, Alexander stood and smoothed down his clothes. "Thank you for letting me meet her properly," he said to Clara as they returned to the living room. "She's remarkable, just like her mother." "She likes you," Clara observed. That's not usual for her. She's normally much more cautious around strangers. Maybe she senses that I care about her mother." The words hung in the air between them, simple but loaded with meaning. Clara felt her breath catch as Alexander moved closer to her, close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from his body. "Clara," he said softly, "I need to ask you something, and I need you to answer honestly." "Okay." "Is there any part of you that thinks this is moving too fast? That maybe we should slow down, take more time to figure out what this is?" Clara considered the question seriously. "Every rational part of my brain is screaming that this is insane. That I barely know you, that you're way out of my league, that I'm setting myself up for another catastrophic heartbreak. And the irrational parts. The irrational parts are telling me that sometimes the best things in life don't make sense on paper. That sometimes you have to trust your instincts, even when they're leading you somewhere scary." Clara reached up and touched his face again, marveling at the way he leaned into her touch. "I'm tired of playing it safe, Alexander. Playing it safe got me nowhere." "So what do? We take it one day at a time. We be honest with each other even when it's hard. We remember that we're both adults with complicated lives and complicated histories." Clara smiled. "And we see what happens." Alexander's answering smile was brilliant. "I can work with that." He leaned down and kissed her, then soft and sweet and full of promise. It was Clara's first real kiss in over 2 years, and she felt it all the way down to her toes. When they broke apart, she was breathless and dizzy, and more alive than she'd felt in longer than she could remember. "I should go," Alexander said reluctantly. "It's late and you both need your sleep." "Will I see you again soon?" Clara asked, then felt ridiculous for the neediness in her voice. "Try to stop me," Alexander said with a grin. "Actually, I was wondering, there's a charity gala next weekend. Nothing too formal, just a fundraiser for the children's hospital. Would you like to go with me?" Clara's first instinct was to say no, to make excuses about not having anything appropriate to wear, about not belonging in that world. But then she remembered her own words about being tired of playing it safe. "I'd love to," she said instead. As Alexander gathered his jacket and prepared to leave, Clara's phone buzzed with another text message. This time her blood didn't run cold when she saw the unknown number. She was learning to distinguish between Jacob's particular brand of manipulative messaging and ordinary spam. But when she read the message, her face went white. Saw some interesting news about Stone Industries today. Funny how small the world is. We should definitely catch up soon. J. Alexander noticed her expression immediately. What is it? Clara handed him the phone wordlessly. His jaw tightened as he read the message. He knows, Clara whispered. Somehow he knows we've been spending time together. How could he possibly know that? I don't know, but Alexander, this is what he does. He finds people's pressure points and exploits them. If he thinks you care about me, if he thinks he can use me to get to you somehow. Alexander's expression was grim but determined. Then he's about to learn that threatening you was the biggest mistake of his life. What are you going to do? Whatever it takes to protect you and Lily. Alexander cupped Clara's face in his hands. Clara, listen to me. Jacob Barrett has no power over you anymore. He can't hurt you. He can't take anything away from you, and he sure as hell can't come between us. You don't know him like I do. He's charming, manipulative, and I'm not some naive woman he can seduce and abandon. Alexander cut her off gently. I know exactly what kind of man he is, and I have resources he can't even dream of. Trust me when I say that Jacob Barrett is about to discover there are consequences for his actions. As Alexander left that night, Clara stood at her window, watching his taillights disappear into the darkness. The evening had been perfect, better than perfect, but Jacob's text message felt like a dark cloud on the horizon, a reminder that her past wasn't as buried as she'd hoped. She checked on Lily one more time before getting ready for bed, finding her daughter sleeping peacefully, with Bunny clutched tight in her arms. As Clara brushed her teeth and changed into her pajamas, she couldn't stop thinking about the way Alexander had looked at Lily, the patience and genuine interest he'd shown in her daughter's books and stories. For so long, Clara had convinced herself that she and Lily were a package deal that no man would want to take on. But tonight, for the first time, she'd seen a different possibility. She'd seen a man who didn't view her daughter as an obstacle to overcome, but as part of what made Clara who she was. As she settled into bed, Clara's phone buzzed with one final message of the night. This one was from Alexander. Thank you for tonight. Thank you for trusting me with your story, your home, and your daughter. Thank you for saying yes to the gala. And don't worry about Jacob. I meant what I said. Sweet dreams. Clara smiled as she typed back. Thank you for seeing us. Really seeing us. For the first time in years, I'm excited about tomorrow. So am I. More than you know. As Clara drifted off to sleep, she found herself thinking about fairy tales and second chances, about the difference between being rescued and being seen. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new uncertainties, and very likely new complications from Jacob's reappearance in her life. But tonight, for the first time since Lily was born, Clara fell asleep feeling like she wasn't facing the world alone. Clara woke Friday morning to the sound of Lily chattering happily in her crib and sunlight streaming through the thin curtains of her bedroom window. For a moment she lay still, letting the memories of the previous evening wash over her like warm honey. The dinner, the conversation, the way Alexander had looked at her daughter with such genuine interest and care. It felt almost too good to be true, like a dream she might wake from at any moment. But then her phone buzzed on the nightstand, and reality came crashing back. Another message from Jacob. Hope you slept well. Looking forward to our reunion. Soon. Clara's stomach churned as she read the words. There was something different about this message, something more urgent and threatening than his previous attempts at contact. She screenshot the text and forwarded it to Alexander, her fingers trembling slightly as she typed. He sent this about an hour ago. I'm starting to get really scared. Alexander's response came within minutes. Don't be scared. I'm handling this. Can you meet me for lunch today? I have news. Clara stared at the message, wondering what kind of news could possibly make this situation better. She typed back quickly. Mrs. Chen can watch Lily from noon to 2. Where should I meet you? My office. I'll have lunch brought in. And Clara, everything is going to be okay. The morning dragged by with agonizing slowness. Clara tried to keep herself busy with household chores and playing with Lily, but her mind kept wandering to worst-case scenarios. What if Jacob had found out where she lived? What if he tried to contact Lily's daycare or showed up at her apartment? What if his interest in Alexander wasn't just about money, but about something darker, more personal? By the time she was ready to leave for lunch, Clara had worked herself into a state of barely controlled panic. Mrs. Chen took one look at her face and immediately pulled her into a maternal hug. Whatever's troubling you, dear, it will work out, the older woman said firmly. Sometimes the universe sends us exactly what we need, exactly when we need it. What if I've put him in danger just by being in his life? Clara whispered. What if my past ends up hurting someone I care about? Then you face it together, Mrs. Chen replied simply. That's what people who care about each other do. The Stone Industries building was a gleaming tower of glass and steel in the heart of the business district, its modern architecture a testament to the company's success and innovation. Clara had worked here for 3 years, but she'd never been above the 15th floor where the marketing department was housed. Alexander's office was on the 42nd floor in the executive suite that was practically a legend among the lower-level employees. The elevator ride to the top seemed to take forever, giving Clara too much time to think about how surreal this all was. Less than a week ago, she'd been counting coins for baby formula. Now she was riding up to have lunch with the CEO, wearing her only decent dress and trying not to think about how out of place she looked in the polished corporate environment. Alexander's assistant, a crisp, professional woman named Sarah, greeted Clara with a warm smile that suggested she'd been expecting her. Ms. Hayes, it's lovely to meet you. Mr. Stone is waiting for you in his office. Clara followed Sarah down a hallway lined with original artwork and floor-to-ceiling windows that offered breathtaking views of the city. Alexander's office was at the end of the hall, behind double doors made of rich mahogany that probably cost more than Clara's annual rent. When Sarah knocked and announced her arrival, Clara heard Alexander's voice call out for her to enter. She pushed open the doors and stepped into a space that was both impressive and surprisingly personal. The office was huge, with a conference area, a sitting area with comfortable leather chairs, and a massive desk positioned to take advantage of the panoramic view. But what caught Clara's attention were the personal touches, photographs of what appeared to be family members, a collection of books that looked well-read rather than decorative, and a small sculpture that seemed handmade rather than purchased from some expensive gallery. Alexander rose from behind his desk as she entered, and Clara was struck again by how commanding his presence was in this environment. He was wearing a charcoal gray suit that emphasized his broad shoulders and lean frame, his dark hair perfectly styled, his expression serious but warm as his eyes met hers. Clara, thank you for coming, he said, moving around the desk to greet her properly. How are you holding up? I've been better, Clara admitted. That text this morning, there was something different about it. More threatening. I know. We need to talk about that. Alexander gestured toward the sitting area, where someone had set up an elegant lunch spread on the coffee table. But first, let's eat. You look like you haven't been sleeping well. As they settled into the leather chairs with plates of what appeared to be gourmet sandwiches and salad, Alexander's expression grew serious. "I have some news about Jacob Barrett," he began. "Some of it's good, some of it's complicated." Clara set down her sandwich, her appetite suddenly gone. "Tell me." "The good news is that my investigator has found enough evidence to destroy any chance Jacob has of getting hired anywhere legitimate in this city. The tax evasion, the fraudulent employment records, the identity theft, we have documentation of all of it. And the complicated news." Alexander was quiet for a moment, and Clara could see him choosing his words carefully. "Jacob Barrett isn't just some random con artist, Clara. He's connected. His father-in-law is Senator Richard Morrison, the same Morrison whose campaign you worked on 3 years ago. Morrison has significant influence in business and political circles, and Jacob has been trading on that connection for years." Clara felt the blood drain from her face. Senator Morrison, but that means... It means Jacob has resources and protection that we hadn't anticipated. It also means he probably knows about our relationship, because Morrison's people have been keeping tabs on Stone Industries since we won that campaign contract. So he's been watching you, and he saw us together. Clara's voice was barely above a whisper. "This is my fault. I've brought this into your life." "Stop." Alexander's voice was firm but gentle. "Clara, look at me. This is not your fault. Jacob Barrett is a predator who targeted you, lied to you, and abandoned you when you needed him most. The fact that he has powerful connections doesn't change any of that. But it changes what he can do to hurt you, to hurt your company. Maybe. But it also changes what I can do to stop him." Alexander leaned forward, his eyes intense. "Clara, I need to tell you something else. Something I probably should have told you sooner." Clara's heart sank. "What? Morrison Holdings isn't just our competitor. They've been trying to buy Stone Industries for the past 2 years. My board has been pressuring me to consider their offers, especially their most recent one." "How recent?" "They submitted a formal buyout proposal 3 days ago, the day after I met you at the hospital." Clara stared at him, the implications slowly sinking in. "You think Jacob's reappearance is connected to the buyout attempt?" "I think Jacob Barrett is exactly the kind of weapon Morrison would use to try to leverage me into a deal. Find something personal, something I care about, and use it as pressure." "Something you care about," Clara repeated quietly. "You mean me?" "Yes, I mean you." Alexander's voice was steady, unwavering. "Clara, I need you to understand something. If Morrison thinks they can use you to manipulate me, they've fundamentally misunderstood the situation." "What do you mean?" "I mean that threatening you doesn't make me more likely to negotiate with them. It makes me more likely to destroy them completely." The cold fury in Alexander's voice sent a shiver down Clara's spine. She was seeing another side of him now, the ruthless businessman who had built an empire and defended it against all challengers. "Alexander, I don't want to be the reason you make decisions that could hurt your company. If walking away from this from us would protect—" "Don't." Alexander's interruption was sharp, almost angry. "Don't you dare suggest that I should sacrifice my personal happiness to appease a bunch of corporate bullies. I've spent my entire adult life making decisions based on what's best for the company, what's best for shareholders, what's best for everyone except myself. I'm done with that. But if they can hurt you through me, then we make sure they can't." Alexander stood and walked to his desk, returning with a thick folder. "I've been thinking about this all morning, and I have a proposal. It's unconventional, and it might sound crazy, but I think it could solve several problems at once." Clara eyed the folder warily. "What kind of proposal?" The job offer I mentioned last night. I want to formalize it. Today. I want you to start Monday as Director of Corporate Social Responsibility with a salary that will make you financially independent and benefits that will protect both you and Lily. Alexander, we talked about this. I can't accept charity. It's not charity. It's strategy. Alexander opened the folder and pulled out what appeared to be an employment contract. Clara, if you're officially a Stone Industries executive, you have legal protections. Company security, legal representation resources that Morrison can't touch. More importantly, any attempt to harm or intimidate you becomes an attack on my company, which gives me legal justification to respond with the full weight of our resources. Clara stared at the contract, her mind racing. You want to hire me to protect me? I want to hire you because you're brilliant, and this company needs someone with your vision and compassion. The fact that it also protects you is a bonus. Alexander sat back down across from her. Clara, I've read your file from your previous employment here. Your performance reviews, your project evaluations, your innovation scores. You were one of our most valuable employees, and losing you was a mistake we can't afford to repeat. But I've been out of the workforce for almost 2 years. My skills are rusty, my confidence is shot. Your skills are fine. As for your confidence, that's something we can rebuild together. Alexander leaned forward, his expression earnest. Clara, I'm not asking you to decide right now, but I am asking you to consider the possibility that this could be the fresh start you need, for you and for Lily. Clara picked up the contract with trembling hands. The salary figure at the top made her gasp. It was more than she'd ever earned in her life, enough to move to a better apartment, to give Lily opportunities Clara had only dreamed of. This is too much, she whispered. It's market rate for a director-level position, Alexander said firmly. Clara, I need you to understand something. This offer isn't about our personal relationship. If we'd never had dinner last night, if there was nothing between us except professional respect, I would still want you for this position. How can I be sure of that? Because I'm willing to put it in writing. Alexander pulled another document from the folder. This is a clause stating that your employment is completely independent of any personal relationship between us. If we break up tomorrow, your job is secure. If we never see each other outside of work again, your position remains unchanged. Clara read through the clause, surprised by how thoroughly it protected her interests. You really thought of everything. I've learned to plan for contingencies. It's kept me alive in this business. Alexander's expression softened. Clara, I know this is overwhelming. I know it's happening fast. But sometimes life forces you to make decisions quickly, and I think this is one of those times. Before Clara could respond, Alexander's phone rang. He glanced at the caller ID and frowned. I need to take this. It's my head of security. He answered the call with a crisp, "Stone here," then listened intently for several minutes. Clara watched his expression grow increasingly grim. Understood. Yes, immediately. And Marcus, double the security on the building until further notice. Alexander ended the call and looked at Clara with serious eyes. We have a problem. What kind of problem? Jacob Barrett was seen in the building's lobby about an hour ago. He didn't try to come up, just sat in the public seating area for about 20 minutes watching the elevators. Security approached him and he left without incident, but he was sending a message, Clara finished. He wanted us to know he could get close whenever he wanted. That's how I read it. Alexander was already moving toward his desk. Clara, I need you to listen to me very carefully. You and Lily are not safe as long as you're living in that apartment. Jacob knows where you live, and he's clearly escalating his behavior. What are you saying? I'm saying you need to move somewhere secure. Tonight. Clara felt panic rising in her chest. I can't afford to move anywhere secure. Even with this job offer, assuming I take it, I wouldn't be able to put down deposits and first month's rent. You're not understanding me, Alexander interrupted gently. I'm not talking about you finding a new apartment. I'm talking about you staying with me. The words hung in the air between them like a loaded weapon. Clara stared at Alexander, certain she'd misheard. Stay with you. My house has a full security system, cameras, motion sensors, the works. The property is gated and monitored 24 hours a day. There's a guest wing that's completely private, your own bedroom, bathroom, sitting area. Lily could have her own room, and there's plenty of space for her to play safely. Alexander, that's a huge step. We've known each other for less than a week. I know how it sounds. But Clara, I can't in good conscience let you go back to that apartment knowing Jacob is escalating. If something happened to you or Lily, because I didn't do everything in my power to protect you. Clara could see the genuine fear in his eyes, the weight of responsibility he was placing on himself. This isn't your fault. None of this is your fault. Maybe not. But it's my choice how to respond to it. Alexander moved closer to her, his voice soft but urgent. Clara, I'm not asking you to make any commitments about us, about our relationship. I'm asking you to let me keep you and your daughter safe while we figure out how to neutralize this threat permanently. And if I say no, then I'll arrange for private security to watch your apartment building. I'll have people following you whenever you leave. I'll do whatever it takes to make sure Jacob can't get near you. Alexander's jaw tightened. But I'd prefer to keep you close where I know you're protected. Clara closed her eyes, trying to process everything that was happening. A week ago, her biggest worry had been stretching her grocery budget until the end of the month. Now she was being offered a high-paying job and a safe place to live by a man who was quickly becoming far more important to her than was probably wise. If I agree to this, she said slowly, what are the ground rules? I mean, how does this work without making things weird between us? However you want it to work, Alexander said immediately. You and Lily would have complete privacy in the guest wing. You'd come and go as you please, eat what you want, live your lives normally. I travel frequently for business anyway, so there would be plenty of times when you'd have the whole house to yourselves. And what about us? This thing between us. Alexander was quiet for a moment, choosing his words carefully. I'd like to continue getting to know you if you're open to that. But there would be no pressure, no expectations. Your safety and comfort come first always. Clara opened her eyes and looked at him, this man who was offering her everything she needed and asking for nothing in return except the chance to protect her. It was overwhelming and terrifying and more generous than anything she could have imagined. Can I think about it? She asked. I mean about moving in. The job. I think I want to say yes to the job. Alexander's smile was brilliant. Really, really. You're right that Lily and I need a fresh start, and this feels like maybe the universe is finally giving me a second chance. Clara picked up the employment contract again. When would you need me to start? Monday, if you're ready. We can arrange temporary childcare until you're comfortable with our on-site facility, and there's no pressure to jump into anything too demanding right away. What would my first projects be? I'd like you to conduct a comprehensive review of our current family support programs and make recommendations for improvements. I'd also like you to research and propose new initiatives, maybe an emergency assistance fund, expanded parental leave policies, partnerships with local childcare providers. Alexander's enthusiasm was evident as he spoke. Clara, this program could be a model for other companies. You could make a real difference in thousands of families' lives. And for the first time since Jacob had reappeared in her life, Clara felt a spark of genuine excitement about the future. This was the kind of work she'd always dreamed of doing, meaningful, impactful, focused on helping people rather than just generating profits. "I want to do this," she said firmly. "I want to take the job. And moving in with me?" Clara was quiet for a long moment, weighing the risks and benefits. On one hand, moving in with Alexander after knowing him for less than a week was objectively insane. On the other hand, staying in her apartment while Jacob escalated his threatening behavior was potentially dangerous. "Can we start with tonight?" she asked finally. "Just to see how it goes. Of course, I'll have someone help you pack whatever you and Lily need." "I can pack myself," Clara said quickly, then caught herself. "Sorry, I'm not used to accepting help." "You're going to have to get used to it," Alexander said gently. "Clara, you're not alone anymore. You don't have to handle everything by yourself." As they finished their lunch and discussed the practical details of Clara's new job and temporary living situation, she found herself marveling at how dramatically her life had changed. It felt like she was living in someone else's story, like she'd stepped through a door into a parallel universe where things actually worked out for her. But even as excitement bubbled up inside her, a small voice in the back of her mind whispered warnings. Things that seemed too good to be true usually were. Men who promised to take care of everything often had their own agendas, and she'd been burned before by trusting too much too quickly. As if sensing her internal struggle, Alexander reached across the coffee table and took her hand. "Clara, I need you to know something," he said quietly. "I understand that this is overwhelming. I understand that you have every reason to be cautious about trusting me, about trusting anyone. If you change your mind about any of this, the job staying at my house, continuing to see me personally, you can walk away anytime. No questions asked, no consequences." "Why?" Clara asked. "Why are you doing all this for someone you barely know?" Alexander was quiet for a long moment, and when he spoke, his voice was soft but certain. "Because 3 years ago I let you walk out of my life without fighting for you. Because I spent every day since then wondering what might have been different if I'd been brave enough to take a chance." He squeezed her hand gently. "I'm not making that mistake again." Before Clara could respond, there was a soft knock on Alexander's office door. Sarah's voice came through the intercom. "Mr. Stone, I'm sorry to interrupt, but there's a gentleman here to see Ms. Hayes. He says it's urgent." Clara's blood turned to ice. "Did he give his name?" "Jacob Barrett. He said to tell you he's been trying to reach you." Alexander was on his feet immediately, his expression dark with fury. "Tell security to escort Mr. Barrett out of the building immediately. If he resists, call the police." "Wait," Clara said, standing as well. "Maybe I should talk to him. Maybe if I face him directly, tell him to leave us alone." "Absolutely not," Alexander said firmly. "Clara, you don't negotiate with predators. You don't give them opportunities to manipulate or intimidate you further." "But what if avoiding him makes things worse? What if he escalates because he can't get to me?" Alexander was already moving toward his desk phone. "Then we deal with that when it happens. But you are not facing him alone, and you're sure as hell not doing it while he has the advantage of surprise." As Alexander spoke quietly into his phone, presumably to security, Clara moved to the window and looked down at the street below. Somewhere down there was Jacob, the man who had shattered her life, and was now threatening to destroy the fragile happiness she was beginning to rebuild. "He's gone," Alexander said, hanging up the phone. "Security escorted him out, and they've been instructed not to let him back in the building under any circumstances." "This is really happening," Clara whispered. "He's really not going to leave us alone." Then we make sure he can't get close enough to matter. Alexander moved to stand behind her at the window, his hands resting gently on her shoulders. Clara, I meant what I said. You and Lily are under my protection now. Jacob Barrett can't touch you. What if he tries to hurt you to get to me? Then he'll discover that I'm not nearly as easy a target as he thinks I am. Alexander's voice was cold, determined. Clara, I've been dealing with threats and corporate warfare my entire career. Jacob Barrett is a small-time con artist with delusions of grandeur. He's not going to win this fight. Clara leaned back against Alexander's solid warmth, allowing herself to feel protected for the first time in years. It was a dangerous feeling, this sense of safety, because it made her want to surrender control completely. But maybe, just maybe, it was okay to let someone else carry the weight for a while. Okay, she said quietly. Okay. Okay, I'll move in with you tonight. Temporarily. Just until we figure out how to make Jacob go away permanently. She felt Alexander's relief in the way his hands tightened slightly on her shoulders. Thank you for trusting me. Thank you for being trustworthy. They spent the rest of the afternoon going over the details of Clara's new position and planning the logistics of moving her and Lily to Alexander's house. By the time Clara left Stone Industries that evening, she had a company credit card access to executive parking and a start date of Monday morning. The drive back to her apartment felt surreal, like she was visiting her old life rather than returning to it. Alexander followed her in his own car, along with a security detail that made Clara feel both safer and more anxious about the level of threat Jacob apparently posed. Packing took longer than expected, partly because Clara kept second-guessing what to bring, and partly because Lily was fascinated by all the activity and wanted to help by unpacking everything Clara put in suitcases. Alexander was patient and helpful, entertaining Lily, while Clara made decisions about clothing and toys and the 1,000 small things that made up their daily life. "Mama, where are we going?" Lily asked, as Clara packed her favorite bedtime stories. "We're going to stay at Alexander's house for a little while," Clara explained. "Remember how nice he was when you were sick? He has a big house with lots of room to play. Will Bunny like it there?" "I think Bunny will love it," Alexander said seriously. "There's a garden where he can look for flowers and big windows where he can watch for birds." Lily considered this carefully, then nodded her approval. "Okay, but I want to bring my nightlight." "Of course you can bring your nightlight," Clara assured her. "We're bringing everything you need to feel comfortable." As they loaded the last of the boxes into Alexander's Tesla, Mrs. Chen appeared on the front steps of the building. Clara had already explained the situation to her neighbor, who had listened with the kind of wise understanding that came from decades of observing human nature. "You're doing the right thing, dear," Mrs. Chen said, pulling Clara into a fierce hug. "Sometimes life gives us exactly what we need, even when we're too scared to ask for it." "I'm going to miss having you next door," Clara said, feeling emotional about leaving the one person who had been consistently kind to her during the darkest period of her life. "I'm not going anywhere, and neither are you, really. This is just a new chapter, not a different book." As they drove through the city toward Alexander's house in the hills, Clara found herself thinking about new chapters and different books. Her life had been rewritten so many times in the past few years, from successful career woman to abandoned pregnant girlfriend, from confident professional to struggling single mother, and now to what executive girlfriend, protected person. She wasn't sure what label fit, but for the first time in longer than she could remember, she was excited to find out. "Second thoughts?" Alexander asked, noticing her quiet mood. "Third and fourth thoughts," Clara admitted. "But not about you. About whether I'm making the right choices for Lily. What do you mean? I keep thinking about what kind of example I'm setting for her. Moving in with a man I barely know. Accepting help that I can't pay back, letting her get attached to someone who might not stick around. Alexander was quiet for a moment as he navigated the winding road up into the hills. Can I tell you what I think you're teaching her? What? That she's worth protecting. That when life gets scary, there are people who will help without expecting anything in return. That her mother is strong enough to make difficult decisions and smart enough to accept support when it's offered. Clara felt tears pricking at her eyes. You really think that? I think Lily is lucky to have a mother who loves her enough to swallow her pride and do whatever it takes to keep her safe. Alexander glanced at her briefly before returning his attention to the road. And I think she's about to learn that not all men disappear when things get complicated. As they pulled into the circular driveway of Alexander's house, Clara saw it with new eyes. This wasn't just a beautiful home, it was a fortress, a place where she and Lily could be safe while they figured out how to rebuild their lives. The security gates, the cameras, the isolation that had seemed intimidating a few nights ago now felt protective, reassuring. Welcome home, Alexander said softly as he turned off the engine. Clara looked at him, this man who was offering her everything she needed and asking for nothing except the chance to be part of her life. It's not home yet, she said honestly. But maybe it could be. Maybe it could be. Alexander agreed, his smile warm with possibility. As they unloaded Lily's things, and Clara tried to process the magnitude of the changes happening in her life, her phone buzzed with one final message from Jacob. Enjoy your fairy tale while it lasts. But remember, all fairy tales have endings. Clara showed the message to Alexander, who deleted it without comment before handing her phone back. No more messages, he said firmly. My security team will be monitoring your accounts and filtering out anything from him or his associates. Can you do that? I can do whatever it takes to protect my family, Alexander said simply. The word hung in the air between them, family. It was presumptuous and premature, and probably a dozen other things, but it was also exactly what Clara and Lily had been missing for so long. As they walked into the house together, Lily chattering excitedly about all the new things she wanted to explore, Clara allowed herself to hope that maybe, just maybe, she was finally where she belonged. The next morning brought the kind of chaos that Clara had forgotten could be joyful. Lily woke up in her new room, a spacious, sun-filled space that Alexander had somehow transformed overnight with child-friendly furniture and toys, and immediately wanted to explore every corner of the house. Clara found herself chasing her energetic daughter through rooms that seemed designed for a magazine spread, each one more beautiful than the last. Mama, look, Lily called from the kitchen, where she'd discovered that the refrigerator dispensed both water and ice cubes. It makes snow. Alexander, who was standing at the stove making what smelled like the world's most perfect pancakes, turned to watch Lily's delighted experimentation with the ice dispenser. She's going to love the pool when it gets warmer, he said to Clara, his voice warm with affection. And there's a playground set in the backyard that I had installed yesterday. Clara stared at him. You had a playground set installed yesterday. I made some calls. Alexander's expression was almost sheepish. I know it seems like a lot, but I wanted Lily to feel at home here. Alexander, you can't keep buying things for us. I'm supposed to be earning my way now, remember? You are earning your way. You start your new job Monday. You'll be contributing to the household. You're already making this place feel more like a home than it has in years. Alexander flipped a pancake with practiced ease. The playground was for me as much as for her. I like hearing her laugh. Before Clara could argue further, her phone rang. The caller ID showed Dr. Patricia Williams from St. Mary's Hospital, and Clara's heart immediately jumped into her throat. "Dr. Williams, is everything okay? Did something happen with Lily's test results?" "Nothing's wrong," the doctor said quickly. "I'm actually calling with some unusual news. We had a visit yesterday from a man claiming to be Lily's father. He was asking about her medical records, wanting to know about her recent hospitalization." Clara felt the blood drain from her face. Alexander immediately moved to her side, his expression alert and concerned. "What did you tell him?" Clara managed to ask. "Nothing, of course. We don't release patient information to anyone without proper documentation and parental consent. But Ms. Hayes, he was quite insistent. He claimed he had legal rights as the father and threatened to involve lawyers if we didn't cooperate." "What did he look like?" Clara asked, though she already knew the answer. "Mid-30s, brown hair, very charming manner. He said his name was Jacob Barrett." Alexander took the phone from Clara's trembling hands. "Dr. Williams, this is Alexander Stone. I was with Ms. Hayes during Lily's hospitalization. The man you described has no legal rights to this child and has been harassing Ms. Hayes. If he contacts the hospital again, please call the police immediately." "Of course, Mr. Stone. I'll make sure all our staff are aware of the situation. Ms. Hayes, I'm so sorry this is happening to you." After Alexander ended the call, Clara sank into one of the kitchen chairs, her legs suddenly weak. "He's not going to stop. He's going to keep escalating until..." "Until what?" Alexander asked, gently crouching down beside her chair. "Until he gets what he wants. Until he destroys everything good in my life, just because he can." Clara's voice was barely above a whisper. "Alexander, maybe I should just talk to him. Find out what he really wants, see if there's a way to make him go away." "No." Alexander's voice was firm. "Clara, look at me. Jacob Barrett doesn't want something from you that he can get through negotiation. He wants power over you. He wants to know that he can disrupt your life whenever he chooses to, that you'll never be free of him. Then what do? We take away his power." Alexander stood and moved to his laptop, which was sitting open on the kitchen counter. "I've been working on something since yesterday. I wanted to wait until I had all the pieces in place, but I think it's time to show you." Alexander turned the laptop screen toward Clara, revealing what appeared to be a detailed investigative report. The header read, "Jacob Barrett, complete background analysis." "My investigators have been busy," Alexander said, scrolling through pages of documents, photographs, and financial records. Jacob Barrett, age 34, originally from Seattle. Married to Patricia Morrison Barrett for 8 years, father of 3 children. Current employment status, unemployed. Recent financial activity, significant debt, multiple defaulted loans, pattern of fraudulent business dealings. Clara scanned the documents, her eyes widening as she read. He owes over $200,000 in back taxes. That's just the federal debt. He also owes money to private lenders, has defaulted on 2 business loans, and is facing a civil lawsuit from his former business partner for embezzlement. Alexander continued scrolling. But here's the really interesting part. The next page showed bank records and what appeared to be email communications. Jacob has been receiving payments from Morrison Holdings for the past 6 months. Not salary, these are listed as consulting fees, but the amounts and timing suggest something else entirely. What kind of something else? Industrial espionage, information gathering, corporate sabotage. Alexander's expression was grim. Clara, I don't think Jacob's interest in you is personal anymore. I think he's being paid to disrupt my life to find pressure points that Morrison can exploit in their buyout attempt. Clara felt sick. So I'm not just his victim, I'm his assignment. It looks that way. which actually gives us an advantage. How is that an advantage? Alexander closed the laptop and turned to face her fully. Because if Jacob is working for Morrison Holdings, then what he's doing isn't just harassment, it's corporate espionage and extortion. That makes it a federal crime, and it gives me legal justification to respond with the full weight of Stone Industries' resources. What are you planning to do? I'm planning to destroy him. Alexander's voice was cold, controlled. Professionally, financially, legally. When I'm done, Jacob Barrett will be unemployable, bankrupt, and quite possibly in federal prison. Clara should have felt relieved, vindicated. Instead, she felt a chill run down her spine at the controlled fury in Alexander's voice. This was a side of him she hadn't seen before, the ruthless corporate warrior who had built an empire and defended it against all comers. Alexander, I don't want you to become someone you're not because of me. I'm not becoming someone I'm not, Alexander said quietly. I'm being exactly who I've always been when someone threatens what I care about. The only difference is that now I have something worth fighting for. Before Clara could respond, Lily came running back into the kitchen, her cheeks flushed with excitement and her hair decorated with what appeared to be flower petals. Mama Alexander, come see the garden, there are butterflies. The moment of dark intensity broke as Alexander's expression immediately softened. Butterflies. That sounds amazing. Should we go investigate? As they followed Lily outside into the sprawling garden behind Alexander's house, Clara tried to reconcile the man who had just promised to destroy her ex-lover with the one who was now crouching down to help her daughter catch a butterfly in her cupped hands. Look, Mama, Lily whispered, holding very still as an orange and black butterfly perched on her finger. It likes me. It knows you're special, Alexander said softly, his camera phone capturing the moment, just like we do. The rest of Saturday passed in a strange mixture of domesticity and underlying tension. Alexander took them on a tour of the house and grounds, showing Lily the pool and the new playground equipment, while explaining to Clara how the security systems worked. They had lunch on the terrace, played games in the afternoon, and settled into a routine that felt both natural and surreal. But underneath the pleasant family atmosphere, Clara could sense Alexander's mind working, planning, calculating his next moves in what was clearly becoming a much larger conflict than she had realized. Sunday brought the reality of the upcoming gala. Clara had completely forgotten about it in the chaos of moving and Jacob's escalating threats, but Alexander reminded her over breakfast that they were expected to attend the Children's Hospital fundraiser that evening. I understand if you'd rather not go, Alexander said carefully. Given everything that's happening, it might be better to stay somewhere secure. No, Clara said, surprising herself with the firmness of her voice. I want to go. I want to show Jacob and Morrison and anyone else who thinks they can intimidate me that I'm not hiding. Are you sure it'll be a very public event? Lots of cameras, lots of people who know my business. I'm sure. Clara looked down at Lily, who was contentedly eating her cereal and chattering to her stuffed rabbit. Besides, I think it's time people knew that you're not as available as they might have thought. Alexander's smile was brilliant. I like the way you think. The problem, of course, was that Clara had absolutely nothing appropriate to wear to a charity gala. Her entire wardrobe consisted of work clothes from her pre-Lily days that no longer fit properly, casual clothes suitable for chasing a toddler, and exactly one decent dress that she'd already worn to dinner at Alexander's house. I can't go to a formal event wearing jeans, Clara said, staring at her limited options spread across the bed in her guest room. Then we'll get you something new, Alexander said from the doorway where he'd been watching her internal fashion crisis with patient amusement. Alexander, I can't keep letting you buy me things. I haven't even started working yet. Consider it a business expense. You're attending as my date representing Stone Industries to some very important donors and community leaders. Is that what I am, your date representing your company? Alexander stepped into the room and took her hands in his. You're whatever you want to be. But Clara, I need you to understand that appearing with me tonight is going to change things. People are going to speculate about our relationship, about your role in my life. Once that happens, there's no going back to anonymity. Clara considered this. The thought of being thrust into the public eye, of becoming the subject of gossip and speculation, was terrifying. But the alternative, hiding in the shadows while Jacob and his allies tried to control her life, was worse. Then let's make sure they have something interesting to speculate about, she said finally. Alexander's answering smile was both proud and predatory. I'll make some calls. What followed was the most surreal shopping experience of Clara's life. Alexander's calls resulted in a team of stylists arriving at the house within 2 hours, carrying what appeared to be half of Nordstrom's formal wear department. They set up a temporary boutique in one of Alexander's guest bedrooms, complete with shoes, jewelry, and accessories. This is insane, Clara muttered as a woman named Sophia held up what had to be a $5,000 gown for her consideration. This is what normal looks like when you're dating a billionaire, Sophia said cheerfully. Trust me, I've dressed a lot of his companions over the years. Clara felt a sharp stab of something that might have been jealousy. Companions. Oh, don't worry about them, Sophia said, apparently oblivious to Clara's discomfort. None of them lasted more than a few months. Mr. Stone has very high standards, and most of the women he's dated were more interested in his money than in him. And what makes you think I'm different? Sophia studied Clara's face carefully. Because you're here getting ready for a charity gala while your daughter naps in the next room, and you keep asking about the price tags instead of assuming someone else will pay for everything. As the afternoon progressed, Clara found herself transformed. The dress they finally settled on was a deep emerald green that complemented her eyes and fit her post-baby figure perfectly. The shoes were higher than anything she'd worn in years. The jewelry was subtle but clearly expensive, and when the makeup artist was finished with her, Clara barely recognized herself in the mirror. You look beautiful, Alexander said when she emerged from the dressing room. He was wearing a perfectly tailored black tuxedo that emphasized his broad shoulders and lean frame, and Clara felt her breath catch at how handsome he looked. You clean up pretty well yourself, she managed to say. We make a good team, Alexander said, offering her his arm. Ready to face the lions. The Westridge Gala was being held at the city's most exclusive hotel, a grand building that had been hosting society events for over a century. As their car pulled up to the red carpet entrance, Clara could see camera flashes already going off, photographers capturing every arrival for the society pages. Any last-minute advice? Clara asked, her nerves finally getting the better of her. Smile, be yourself, and remember that you belong here just as much as anyone else, Alexander said. And Clara, if anyone makes you uncomfortable, if anyone says anything that upsets you, you tell me immediately. The moment they stepped out of the car, Clara understood what Alexander had meant about there being no going back. The camera flashes were blinding, and she could hear photographers calling out questions. Mr. Stone, who's your date tonight? Is this a new relationship? What's her name? Alexander handled the attention with practiced ease, his hand steady and reassuring on Clara's back as he guided her through the crowd. He didn't answer the shouted questions, but he didn't try to hide her either. Instead, he introduced her to several people as they made their way into the ballroom, his pride in her evident in his voice and manner. Clara Hayes, our new director of corporate social responsibility, he would say, and Clara found herself shaking hands with city councilmen, hospital board members, and prominent business leaders who all seemed genuinely interested in her work. The ballroom itself was breathtaking: crystal chandeliers, silk wall coverings, and tables set with china that probably cost more than Clara's monthly rent. But what struck her most was how comfortable Alexander seemed in this environment, how naturally he moved between conversations about business, politics, and philanthropy. "You're good at this," Clara observed as they found their assigned table. "I've had a lot of practice," Alexander replied. "But I have to admit, it's more enjoyable when I have someone interesting to share it with." Their table companions included Dr. Williams from the hospital, a city councilwoman Clara recognized from the news, and several other Stone Industries executives with their spouses. The conversation was lively and engaging, covering everything from healthcare policy to urban development to the challenges of balancing work and family life. "Clara, I'm so impressed by what Alexander tells me about your new position," said Margaret Chen, the wife of Stone Industries' CFO. "Corporate social responsibility is such important work, especially in today's business climate." "Thank you. I'm excited about the opportunity to make a real difference in people's lives," Clara replied, feeling more confident as the evening progressed. "And how are you finding the transition back to corporate life?" asked Dr. Williams. "I imagine it's quite an adjustment after being home with your daughter." "It is, but Stone Industries has been incredibly supportive. The on-site childcare and flexible scheduling make it possible for me to be both a good mother and a good employee." Alexander's hand found hers under the table, a quiet gesture of support and pride that sent warmth spreading through her chest. The evening's program included a silent auction presentations from hospital staff about recent achievements and testimonials from families who had been helped by the Children's Hospital. Clara found herself genuinely moved by the stories, thinking about her own recent experience with Lily's illness and how different it might have been without Alexander's support. "Ladies and gentlemen," the evening's MC announced, as dinner was being served, "we have a special surprise tonight. Mr. Alexander Stone has generously agreed to match all donations made this evening, dollar for dollar, up to $1 million. The applause was thunderous, and Clara looked at Alexander in surprise. "You didn't mention that." "I wanted it to be a surprise," Alexander said with a smile. "Besides, after spending time with you and Lily in that hospital, I have a better appreciation for the work they do." As the evening continued, Clara found herself relaxing and actually enjoying the sophisticated atmosphere. The wine was excellent, the food was incredible, and the company was stimulating. For the first time in years, she felt like she was exactly where she belonged. But that sense of peace was shattered when she excused herself to visit the ladies' room and found herself face to face with a woman she immediately recognized from the photographs in Alexander's investigative report. "You must be Clara," the woman said, with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "I'm Patricia Barrett. I believe you know my husband." Clara's blood turned to ice. Patricia Barrett was exactly what Clara would have expected Jacob to marry: tall, blonde, impeccably dressed, with the kind of polished beauty that spoke of expensive salons and personal trainers. But there was something cold in her eyes, something calculating, that made Clara's skin crawl. "Mrs. Barrett," Clara said carefully, "I wasn't expecting to see you here." "Oh, I make it a point to attend all the important social events. You never know who you might run into." Patricia's smile grew sharper. "I have to say you're not quite what I was expecting." "I'm sorry. When Jacob told me about his former relationship, I pictured someone different, someone more obviously desperate, I suppose." Clara felt anger flare in her chest, but she kept her voice level. "I'm not sure what you're implying, Mrs. Barrett." "I'm not implying anything, dear. I'm stating quite directly that I know all about your little arrangement with Mr. Stone. The job, the house, the security detail. Very clever, really, finding a wealthy man to solve all your problems. My relationship with Alexander has nothing to do with money. Of course it doesn't, Patricia said with mock sympathy. I'm sure it's just a coincidence that you went from counting pennies to wearing designer gowns in less than a week. Before Clara could respond, she heard Alexander's voice behind her. Mrs. Barrett, he said, his tone cold and controlled. How unexpected to see you here. Patricia's expression immediately shifted to one of polished charm. Mr. Stone, what a pleasure. I was just getting acquainted with your lovely companion. I'm sure you were, Alexander said, moving to stand beside Clara. Clara, are you ready to return to our table? Actually, Patricia said before Clara could answer. I was hoping we could all have a little chat about Jacob and some concerns that have come to my attention. I have no interest in discussing your husband, Alexander said firmly, even when his behavior affects your business interests. Patricia's smile was triumphant. You see, Mr. Stone, Jacob has been telling me some very interesting stories about his time with Clara, about certain indiscretions that might be of interest to your board of directors. Clara felt the ground shift beneath her feet. What are you talking about? Oh, just some photos, some personal communications. Nothing too scandalous, but you know how these things can be taken out of context. Patricia examined her manicured nails with affected casualness. Of course, if Jacob were to receive a certain consideration for his discretion. Are you blackmailing us? Clara asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Such an ugly word, Patricia said with a laugh. I prefer to think of it as negotiating a mutually beneficial arrangement. Alexander's expression had gone completely cold, and when he spoke, his voice was like ice. Mrs. Barrett, I think you may have fundamentally misunderstood the situation. Have I? You seem to think that I'm the kind of man who can be intimidated by amateur-hour blackmail schemes. You seem to think that I care more about my reputation than I do about protecting the people I love. Alexander stepped closer to Patricia, his presence suddenly intimidating, despite his calm demeanor. You're wrong on both counts. Mr. Stone, I think you should consider— No, Mrs. Barrett. I think you should consider something. Your husband is currently under federal investigation for corporate espionage, tax evasion, and fraud. The photographs and communications you're referring to were obtained illegally, which makes attempting to use them for extortion a federal crime. Alexander's smile was razor-sharp. By tomorrow morning, both you and your husband will be facing charges that could result in significant prison time. Patricia's composure cracked for the first time. You can't prove any of that. Actually, I can. I have financial records, email communications, and testimony from multiple witnesses. I also have security footage of Jacob attempting to access confidential medical records and corporate facilities without authorization. Alexander pulled out his phone. Would you like me to call the FBI now, or would you prefer to have this conversation downtown? You're bluffing, Patricia said, but Clara could hear the uncertainty in her voice. Try me, Alexander said simply. For a moment, the three of them stood in tense silence. Then Patricia seemed to deflate, her polished facade cracking completely. You don't understand, she said desperately. Jacob owes money to very dangerous people. If he doesn't pay them back soon, then perhaps he should have thought of that before he decided to make threats against my family, Alexander said, without an ounce of sympathy. Your family? Patricia's eyes widened as she looked between Alexander and Clara. Oh my God. This isn't just some fling, is it? You actually care about her. More than you can possibly understand, Alexander said quietly. Patricia stared at them for another moment, then seemed to make a decision. I need to go, she said abruptly. I need to find Jacob before. She didn't finish the sentence, but she didn't need to. Patricia Barrett hurried out of the ladies' room, leaving Clara and Alexander alone with the weight of what had just happened. Are you okay? Alexander asked immediately, his cold corporate mask dropping away to reveal genuine concern. I think so, Clara said, though her hands were shaking. Alexander, did you really have all that evidence against Jacob, or were you bluffing? I had most of it, Alexander admitted. The rest I'll have by tomorrow morning. And Patricia, what happens to her? That depends on what she does next. If she's smart, she'll cooperate with the investigation and testify against her husband. If she's not, Alexander shrugged, then she'll go down with him. Clara felt a strange mixture of satisfaction and sadness. I almost feel sorry for her. She seemed genuinely scared. She should be scared. But Clara, her fear doesn't excuse what they tried to do to you, what they've been doing to you. I know, it's just seeing her like that, seeing how desperate she was. It made me realize how much Jacob must have lied to her too. Alexander pulled Clara into his arms, holding her close as she processed everything that had happened. You have a good heart, he said softly. Even after everything they put you through, you still feel compassion for them. Is that stupid? It's one of the things I love most about you. The words hung in the air between them, unexpected and powerful. Clara pulled back to look at Alexander's face, seeing the surprise in his own eyes at what he'd just said. Did you just say you love me? She asked quietly. Alexander paused, clearly struggling with how to respond. Yes, I think I did. Do you mean it? Alexander was quiet for a long moment, and when he spoke, his voice was steady and certain. Yes, I mean it. I know it's too soon. I know we haven't known each other long enough. But Clara, I love you. I love your strength, your compassion, your dedication to your daughter. I love the way you make me want to be a better man. Clara felt tears pricking at her eyes. Alexander. You don't have to say it back, he said quickly. I know this is all happening very fast, and I know you need time to process everything. I needed you to know how I feel. Clara reached up and cupped his face in her hands. I love you too, she whispered. I think I've been falling in love with you since that night in the hospital, watching you with Lily. I was just too scared to admit it. Alexander's kiss was soft and desperate and full of promise. When they broke apart, Clara felt like everything in her world had shifted into perfect focus. What happens now? She asked. Now we go back to our table and finish this gala like the strong, successful couple we are, Alexander said with a smile. And tomorrow, we start building our future together. As they returned to the ballroom hand in hand, Clara felt a sense of completion she'd never experienced before. The threats from Jacob and Patricia seemed less important now, overshadowed by the certainty of what she and Alexander had found together. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of congratulations, successful fundraising announcements, and what felt like hundreds of introductions to people who would now be part of Clara's new social and professional circle. Alexander never left her side, his pride in her evident to everyone they met. As they finally made their way to the car at the end of the night, Clara's feet aching in her beautiful shoes and her heart full of happiness and hope, Alexander's phone buzzed with a text message. Work? Clara asked. Alexander glanced at the message and smiled grimly. Patricia Barrett just agreed to cooperate with the federal investigation. She's providing all the evidence we need to put Jacob away for a very long time. So it's over, really over. It's over. Alexander confirmed, pulling Clara close as their car pulled away from the hotel. Jacob Barrett will never threaten you or Lily again. Clara leaned against Alexander's shoulder, feeling the last of her fear and anxiety drain away. I can't believe how much my life has changed in just 1 week. Do you regret any of it? Clara thought about the question seriously. A week ago, she'd been alone, struggling counting pennies for baby formula. Tonight, she was wearing a designer gown, having just attended a charity gala, with the man she loved, secure in the knowledge that she and her daughter were safe and protected. No, she said finally. I don't regret any of it. For the first time in years, I feel like I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. Good, Alexander said, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. Because I have plans for us. Big plans. What kind of plans? The kind that involve forever, Alexander said simply. As their car wound through the city streets toward home, Clara allowed herself to believe in forever, for the first time since Lily was born. She thought about new beginnings and second chances, about the difference between being rescued and being truly seen and valued. Tomorrow would bring her first day at her new job, new challenges and opportunities, and the beginning of a life she'd never dared to imagine. But tonight, she was simply a woman in love, heading home with her family, to the place where she finally belonged. 6 months later, Clara stood in her corner office on the 41st floor of Stone Industries, looking out at the city skyline, while Lily played quietly with her toys in the adjacent childcare area that had become a model for other companies nationwide. The corporate social responsibility program had exceeded every expectation, helping over 3,000 families in its first quarter alone, and Clara had been featured on the cover of Business Weekly as one of the year's most innovative executives. But none of that mattered as much as the phone call she'd just received. "Mama sad?" Lily asked, looking up from her coloring book with those perceptive eyes that seemed to see everything. "Not sad, baby girl," Clara said, crouching down to Lily's level. "Just thinking about some grown-up things." The truth was more complicated. Jacob Barrett had been sentenced that morning to 8 years in federal prison for corporate espionage, fraud, and extortion. Patricia had received a suspended sentence in exchange for her cooperation, and Morrison Holdings was facing its own federal investigation that would likely result in massive fines and criminal charges for several executives. Justice had been served, but Clara found herself feeling empty rather than vindicated. She'd thought this moment would bring closure, but instead it just felt like the final page of a chapter she was ready to forget entirely. "Clara." Alexander's voice came from her office doorway, and she turned to see him standing there with an expression she couldn't quite read. "Do you have a minute?" "Of course." Clara stood smoothing down her skirt. Even after 6 months of dating Alexander, she sometimes still felt like she was playing dress-up in her professional clothes. "What's on your mind?" "Actually, I was hoping you might want to take the afternoon off. All of us." Alexander's eyes shifted to Lily, who had abandoned her coloring to listen to the adult conversation. "I have something I'd like to show you both." "What kind of something?" "The kind that's better experienced than explained." Alexander's smile was mysterious, almost nervous. "Trust me." Clara studied his face, noting the barely contained excitement beneath his calm exterior. "Should I be worried?" "You should be prepared for anything." 20 minutes later, they were in Alexander's Tesla, driving through parts of the city Clara didn't recognize. Lily was strapped into her car seat, chattering happily about the buildings and trees they passed, while Clara tried to figure out where they were going, based on the route Alexander was taking. "Are we going to your house?" she asked, as they turned onto a tree-lined street in an upscale residential neighborhood. "Not exactly." Alexander replied, his hands tightening slightly on the steering wheel. Clara, can I ask you something? Anything. Are you happy, really happy with how things have worked out? Clara looked at him in surprise. Of course I'm happy. Alexander, these past 6 months have been like living in a dream. The job, the house, you and me. Why would you even ask that? Because I want to make sure you're with me, because you want to be, not because you felt like you had to be. Not because I was your only option when things were difficult. Clara reached over and placed her hand on his arm. Alexander Stone, if you think I'm with you out of gratitude or convenience, then you haven't been paying attention. I'm with you because I love you. Because you make me laugh, because you read bedtime stories to my daughter like she's the most important person in the world. Because you see me as a partner, not a project to fix. Alexander's tension seemed to ease slightly. Good. That's good to know. They pulled into the driveway of a beautiful colonial-style house with a wraparound porch and mature oak trees shading a spacious front yard. It was the kind of house Clara had dreamed about when she was pregnant with Lily, imagining a stable, loving home where her daughter could grow up safe and happy. Whose house is this, whom? Clara asked as Alexander turned off the engine. Technically mine, as of about 2 hours ago. Alexander's smile was nervous but hopeful, but I was hoping it might become ours. Clara stared at him, her heart beginning to race. What are you saying? I'm saying that I bought this house for us. For you, me, and Lily. Because I want us to have a home together, not just a temporary arrangement. Alexander turned in his seat to face her fully. Clara, I know we haven't talked about this explicitly, but I need you to know that what I want isn't just a relationship. I want a life with you. I want to wake up next to you every morning and read bedtime stories to our daughter every night. Our daughter, if you'll let me be her father. Not legally, not to take anything away from your role as her mother, but in all the ways that matter. Alexander's voice was soft but certain. I love her, Clara. I love both of you more than I ever thought possible. Before Clara could respond, Lily piped up from the back seat. Alexander, are we going to live in the pretty house? Alexander turned to look at the little girl who had completely captured his heart. Would you like that, Lily? Would you like to have your own room in the pretty house with windows that look out at the big trees? With Mama. And you, if your mama says yes, then yes with me too. Lily clapped her hands in delight. I say yes, Mama say yes. Clara felt tears streaming down her face as she looked between Alexander and her daughter, seeing the love and hope in both their faces. You really want this? Both of you. More than anything, Alexander said quietly. Then yes, Clara whispered. Yes, I want this too. The tour of the house was magical. Every room seemed designed with their family in mind, a spacious kitchen with an island perfect for homework and family meals, a living room with built-in bookshelves, and a fireplace, a master bedroom with sitting area and views of the garden. But it was Lily's room that brought tears to Clara's eyes again. Alexander had somehow managed to recreate the feeling of her daughter's temporary room at his house, but with built-in features and custom touches that spoke of permanence and belonging. There's a playroom upstairs, Alexander said, as Lily explored her new space with obvious delight. And the backyard has room for a bigger playground set, maybe a treehouse when she's older. Alexander, this is too much, Clara said, overwhelmed by the generosity and thoughtfulness evident in every detail. It's not too much. It's exactly what we need. Alexander took her hands in his. Clara, I've been thinking about this for months, about what it means to build a life with someone, to create something lasting and meaningful. This house isn't just about having a place to live. It's about having a foundation for our future. What kind of future? Alexander was quiet for a moment, and Clara could see him gathering his courage for something. The kind that includes marriage if you're open to that someday. The kind that maybe includes giving Lily a brother or sister if that's something you'd want. The kind that includes growing old together, watching our children graduate and get married and have children of their own. Clara felt her breath catch. Are you proposing to me? Not today, Alexander said with a smile. When I propose to you, it's going to be perfect. Romantic, memorable, worthy of the story we'll tell our grandchildren someday. He squeezed her hands gently. But I am telling you that I want to marry you, Clara. I want to adopt Lily if you'll let me. I want us to be a real family legally and emotionally and in every way that matters. And if I'm not ready for that yet, then we take as much time as you need. This house is ours, whether we're married or not, whether you take my name or keep your own, whether we have more children, or Lily remains our only child. Alexander's voice was steady and sure. What matters to me is that we're together, that we're building something meaningful, that we're choosing each other every day. Clara looked around the beautiful room, imagining Lily growing up here, having friends over for sleepovers, doing homework at the built-in desk, reading books in the window seat that overlooked the garden. She imagined herself and Alexander in the master bedroom, sharing quiet mornings and peaceful evenings, supporting each other through whatever challenges life might bring. I love you, she said simply. I love you so much that sometimes it scares me. Why does it scare you? Because I never thought I could have this. I never thought I deserved this kind of happiness, this kind of love. Clara's voice trembled slightly. Sometimes I wake up in the morning, and for a split second, I think I'm going to find out it's all been a dream. It's not a dream, Alexander said firmly. It's real, it's ours, and it's not going anywhere. As if summoned by their conversation, Lily came running back into the room, her face flushed with excitement. Mama Alexander, I found a secret door. A secret door? Alexander asked with mock surprise. That sounds very mysterious. Come see, come see. They followed Lily down the hallway to what appeared to be a linen closet. But when she opened the door, it revealed a small reading nook with built-in bookshelves and soft cushions. It's perfect for reading stories, Lily announced, and for hiding when the monsters come. What monsters? Clara asked, her maternal instincts immediately alert. The pretend monsters, Lily clarified with the patient tone of a child, explaining something obvious to adults. Not real monsters. Real monsters can't come here because Alexander keeps us safe. Clara felt her heart clench with emotion at her daughter's simple faith in the man who had become such an important part of their lives. That's right, Alexander said seriously, crouching down to Lily's level. No monsters allowed in our house, that's the rule. What if they try to come in anyway? Then we'll face them together, Alexander said firmly. That's what families do. As they continued exploring the house, Clara found herself marveling at how naturally they functioned as a unit. Alexander anticipated Lily's needs and interests. Lily trusted him completely, and Clara felt like she was watching her daughter discover what it meant to have a father figure who was reliable, loving, and present. The kitchen had been stocked with groceries, and Alexander suggested they cook dinner together as their first meal in their new home. Clara found herself laughing as Lily helped by adding entirely too much cheese to their pasta sauce, while Alexander attempted to teach her the proper way to stir without making a mess. This is chaos, Clara observed, watching flour somehow migrate from the cutting board to Lily's hair. This is family. Alexander corrected, stealing a kiss while Lily was distracted by the timer on the oven. After dinner, they gave Lily a bath in the luxurious master bathroom, then settled into her new room for bedtime stories. Alexander had somehow managed to transfer all of her favorite books, stuffed animals, and comfort items so that the space felt familiar, despite being completely new. "Will you read tonight?" Lily asked Alexander, holding up her current favorite book. "I'd be honored," Alexander said, settling into the reading chair beside her bed. As Alexander read about brave princesses and magical kingdoms, Clara found herself thinking about fairy tales and happy endings. Her story with Jacob had felt like a cautionary tale, a warning about trusting too quickly, believing too easily, hoping for too much. But this with Alexander and Lily felt like the kind of story she'd dreamed about as a child, but never quite believed could be real. "Mama," Lily's sleepy voice interrupted her thoughts. "Yes, baby girl. Are we really going to live here forever?" Clara looked at Alexander, seeing the hope and vulnerability in his eyes. "Would you like that?" "Yes," Lily said firmly. "I like having a daddy." The word hit Clara like a physical blow. They'd never explicitly discussed what Lily should call Alexander, and he'd never pushed for any particular title. But somehow naturally, her daughter had decided that this man who read her stories and played her games and made her feel safe deserved the title that Jacob had never earned. "Is that okay?" Lily asked, suddenly uncertain. "Can I call him Daddy?" Clara felt tears threatening again. "If Alexander says it's okay, then it's okay with me." Alexander's voice was rough with emotion when he answered, "I would be honored to be your daddy, Lily." "Good," Lily said, with the matter-of-fact satisfaction of a child who had solved an important problem. "Now, we're a real family." After Lily fell asleep, Clara and Alexander found themselves in the living room, sitting together on the couch that had come with the house, processing the magnitude of the day's changes. "Are you okay?" Alexander asked, noting Clara's quiet mood. "I'm more than okay," Clara said honestly. "I'm just overwhelmed, I think. 6 months ago, I was counting pennies for formula. Tonight, I'm sitting in a beautiful house with the man I love, listening to my daughter call him Daddy. Do you think it's happening too fast?" Clara considered the question seriously. "Maybe it should feel too fast. Maybe I should be more cautious, more skeptical. But Alexander, when I think about slowing down, when I imagine putting the brakes on this relationship, I don't want to. What we have feels right in a way that nothing else ever has. Even with Jacob, especially compared to Jacob." Clara turned to face Alexander fully. "What Jacob and I had was built on lies and manipulation. He told me what he thought I wanted to hear, created a fantasy that was designed to serve his purposes. But you see me as I really am, flaws and all, and you love me anyway. I love you because of who you really are, not despite it." Clara leaned against Alexander's shoulder, feeling safe and content in a way she'd never experienced before. "Can I tell you something? Always. The night we met, when you paid for Lily's formula, I thought you were just being kind to a stranger. I never imagined that moment would change my entire life." "I knew," Alexander said quietly. "You knew what?" "I knew that meeting you again was going to change everything. I'd been thinking about you for 3 years, wondering what might have been different if I'd been brave enough to ask you out when we worked together. When I saw you in that store counting coins with such dignity and determination, I knew I wasn't going to let you walk out of my life again. Even though I came with complications, a daughter, an ex who turned out to be a criminal, a complete lack of financial stability, especially because of those things. Alexander's arms tightened around her. Clara, I'd spent years dating women who were perfectly suitable on paper, but left me feeling empty. You were real, complicated, challenging, and absolutely perfect. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the fire Alexander had built in the fireplace and listening to the quiet sounds of their new home settling around them. Finally, Clara spoke up with a question that had been nagging at her. What happens with your old house? I'll probably sell it, or maybe keep it as a guest house for when we have visitors. Alexander shrugged. It was never really a home, just a place where I lived. This feels like home. Because of the house itself. Because of who I'm sharing it with. Clara felt her heart swell with emotion. I love you, Alexander Stone. I love you for saving us, but more than that, I love you for seeing us as worth saving. You saved yourself, Clara. I just provided some resources and moral support. No, Clara said firmly. You provided hope. You showed me that I was worth fighting for, that Lily deserved better than just surviving. You helped me remember who I was before everything fell apart. Alexander was quiet for a moment, and when he spoke, his voice was thoughtful. You know what the ironic thing is? What? I thought I was rescuing you, but you were actually rescuing me. Before I met you, I was successful but empty. I had everything money could buy, but nothing that actually mattered. You and Lily gave me purpose, meaning a reason to be better than just profitable. So we rescued each other. I think we found each other, Alexander corrected. And I think we're going to keep finding each other every day for the rest of our lives. As they prepared for bed in their new master bedroom, Clara found herself thinking about the future in ways she hadn't dared to in years. She thought about Lily starting kindergarten in the fall, about family vacations and holiday traditions, about the possibility of siblings and birthday parties, and all the ordinary, extraordinary moments that made up a life well lived. Alexander, she said, as they settled under the covers together. When you said you wanted to propose to me someday, how someday are we talking? Alexander turned to face her in the darkness, his smile visible in the moonlight, streaming through their bedroom windows. Are you asking because you're hoping it'll be soon, or because you're hoping I'll wait a while longer? I'm asking because I want to make sure I'm ready when it happens. I want to be able to say yes without any doubt, without any fear. And how do you feel right now? Clara considered the question honestly. Right now I feel like I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. Like all the difficult things that happened before were just preparing me to appreciate what we have now. So, if I were to hypothetically propose in the near future, hypothetically speaking, what would your answer be? Clara laughed softly. Hypothetically, I think my answer would be an emphatic yes. Good to know, Alexander said, pulling her closer. Hypothetically speaking. 3 weeks later, Clara found herself back at Murphy's corner store, but this time she was there by choice rather than desperation. She'd offered to pick up ice cream for their family movie night, and she'd deliberately chosen the same store where her life had changed so dramatically 6 months earlier. The teenage cashier was the same one who had been so impatient with her that night, though he clearly didn't recognize her in her professional attire and confident demeanor. As Clara paid for the ice cream with her company credit card, she thought about the woman she'd been then versus the woman she was now. "Ma'am," the cashier said, interrupting her thoughts. "Your change." Clara looked down at the few dollars he was holding out to her, then smiled. "Keep it," she said. "Consider it a tip for good customer service." As she walked out of the store, Clara's phone buzzed with a text from Alexander. "How did it feel going back there, like visiting a museum exhibit of my old life?" she typed back. Interesting, but not where I belong anymore. And where do you belong? Home with my family. Perfect answer. See you soon. Clara was smiling as she got into her car, not the beat-up sedan she'd driven 6 months ago, but a sensible SUV that Alexander had insisted they needed for car seats and groceries and all the practical requirements of family life. As she drove through the familiar streets toward home, she found herself thinking about the concept of belonging. For so long, she'd felt like she was living on the margins, never quite fitting anywhere, always struggling to find her place in the world. But now, with Alexander and Lily, she finally understood what it meant to truly belong somewhere. Not because someone had rescued her or taken pity on her, but because she'd found people who loved her exactly as she was and wanted to build a life together. When she pulled into their driveway, Clara could see Alexander and Lily through the living room window building what appeared to be an elaborate fort out of couch cushions and blankets. The sight filled her with such overwhelming joy that she had to sit in the car for a moment, just watching her family and marveling at how much her life had changed. "Mama's home," Lily called out, as Clara walked through the front door, and both Alexander and her daughter came running to greet her as if she'd been gone for days instead of an hour. "Did you miss me?" Clara asked, accepting hugs from both of them. "Always," Alexander said, stealing a quick kiss. "But we kept busy building the ultimate movie-watching fort." "It has cup holders," Lily announced proudly, "and a special place for Bunny to sit." As they settled into the fort for their movie night, Clara found herself thinking about fairy tales again. She'd always been skeptical of stories that ended with happily ever after, believing them to be unrealistic fantasies that set people up for disappointment. But now she was beginning to understand that happily ever after didn't mean life became perfect and problem-free. It meant finding someone worth facing life's challenges with, someone who chose to love you not just in the easy moments, but especially in the difficult ones. "What are you thinking about?" Alexander asked softly, noticing her contemplative mood as the opening credits began to roll. "Happy endings," Clara replied, "and new beginnings." "Are they the same thing?" Clara looked around at their cozy fort, at Lily snuggled between them, with her stuffed rabbit, at Alexander's patient smile as he waited for her to finish her thought. "I think maybe they are," she said finally. "I think every happy ending is really just the beginning of a new story." Alexander's smile was brilliant. "I like our new story." "Me too," Clara said, settling more comfortably against his shoulder. "I can't wait to see how it ends." "It doesn't end," Lily piped up with the certainty of a child who understood important things that adults sometimes forgot. "Good stories go on forever." As the movie began and Clara felt the warmth of her family surrounding her, she realized that her daughter was right. The best stories didn't have endings at all. They just kept unfolding chapter after chapter, surprise after surprise, love after love. 6 months ago, Clara had been counting pennies for baby formula, believing she was alone in the world, with nothing but her love for her daughter to sustain her. Tonight, she was sitting in a fort made of cushions and dreams, surrounded by more love than she'd ever dared to imagine possible. It had started with coins scattered on a convenience store counter, a moment of desperation and shame that had seemed like the lowest point of her life. But sometimes Clara reflected as she watched Alexander patiently explain the movie plot to an increasingly drowsy Lily. The moments that feel like endings are actually the exact place where your real life begins. And sometimes, if you're very lucky and very brave, the person who helps you buy formula for your sick child turns out to be the person who helps you remember that you deserve not just survival, but happiness. Not just security, but love. Not just a second chance, but a first-class seat to the rest of your life. The movie played on Lily's breathing grew deep, and even against Clara's side, and Alexander's hand found hers in the darkened fort. Outside, the world continued its complicated dance of joy and sorrow, triumph and disappointment, dreams deferred and hopes fulfilled. But inside their fort, inside their home, inside the love they'd built together, from scattered coins and desperate prayers, and the simple courage to trust again, Clara knew, with absolute certainty, that she was exactly where she belonged. The fairy tale was real after all.